Hi everyone. Today we'll be doing part 3 of Interview with the Vampire, whereas part 1 was basically most of the preliminary material, or at least the preliminary material that I produced up until 5/4/2026, and part 2 concerned new material that I had produced since then, as well as me spilling a bit of tea about the person who, for all intents and purposes, turned me into a vampire, poetically speaking, as a queer allegory. Part 3 of Interview with the Vampire will read a little bit more new material, paratextually speaking, but also my essay about vampire Supermen. All of that being said, if you scroll down to the table of contents, you can see the changes that I'm talking about. Postscript 5/4/2026. I expanded on holistic struggle to include a polemic when made in response to Angela Benedict's dubious Goth has a brain rot problem 5/4/2026. Added to the footnotes 11a and my aforementioned polemic, but also a side note to ghastly invitations, and note about the footnotes and black cat stigma animals, and a new section footnote sample 5/5/2026, and wrote taste test featuring Cuwu, adding it under footnote sample 5/6/2026. So, for part 3 of Interview with the Vampire, I'll be reading taste test, and, scrolling down, we'll also be reading On Tyrants and Their Charm, or Sacking Troy from Within, while castrating Nazi strongmen, a mini-essay about vampires, capital, and nation-states from outer space, featuring Stalin, Superman, DBZ, and Invincible. Also, as of after taking a nap, seeing that Anita Bryant's 21st century clone, Angela Benedict, played the race card. The images are cropped here, but in any event, this is something that I decided to respond to. Here we only have the basic sort of badly butchered version of that, whereas here in the section where Angela Benedict appears on Holistic Struggle, I actually respond to their very lazy cherry-picking kind of commentary on what I wrote about them initially, which is to say they focus on one thing that I said, calling them pasty white, when I was referring not to their ethnic character, but the fact that they are wearing pasty white corpse paint. Though I do say pasty white ass, to clarify, I was referring to them as a person. And I go on to explain that and talk about multiculturalism, tokenism, and race as a social construct that plays out in ways that I also want to read in this video. So look for that after we read Taste Test. Hi everyone. I expanded a couple of things, relatively short things, but I wanted to include this here. Basically, on 5/7/2026, I added a food for thought exercise on Yoshi's Island before the essay section, one to acclimate readers to the critical thinking skills that critiquing Superman, like Stalin and Thragg and their dogma, requires, something that starts at birth. At the same time, Angela Benedict responded to me again, specifically when I posted some initial responses to them that I go over more in detail in the essay itself, or the body of Interview with the Vampire, which includes criticisms of them and the stupid shit that they're saying. RE, playing the race card doesn't help your case, Angela, but I'll cite it here alongside my original response, while also giving some additional bits I wrote elsewhere. And they say, hey, thank you so much for promoting my video. I appreciate the watch, engagement, and love. To which I write here, and who responded, about as well as you'd expect, above, vainly, it reminds me of the boastful and cozy dragon Smog with his waistcoat of diamonds. Gets criticism, plays race card, gets countered with anti-racism card, gives up and fans eyelashes like a Jane Austen villain, showing me their belly and weak spot, as bare and exposed as a snail out of its shell. Impunity is the apex of privilege, love. And that's all the more I'm going to say about them at this point. But I will read and include the part about Yoshi's Island in this video before we look at the essay about Supermen, just because it does provide some food for thought in a format that is relatively simplified, so it should be easy to understand, relatively speaking, that of a storybook, a children's story in particular. As usual, before we start, I just want to mention that this part of Interview with the Vampire belongs to Concerning State Vampirism, part of a larger series on state vampirism specifically. As I conceive it, state vampirism equals feeding through the state mid-abjection, be it openly capitalist or Marxist-Leninist. And if you want to know more about that, you can pause and read the entire thing. I've read it multiple times, so I'm just going to skip ahead. But here it is. Also, the disclaimers. Interview with the Vampire is part of my Sex Positivity book series, which continues into 2026. An essay on and interviews with other sex workers in particular, all of whom I credit on my acknowledgements pages. As usual, here's the inner cover page, if you want to pause and read it. And Bay Ryan, one of my partners and the co-editor and writer of Sex Positivity versus Sex Coercion or Gothic Communism. Disclaimer regarding the contents herein. All opinions are my own. I, as part of my research conducted alongside my book series, Gothic Communism. The material within is written, speaks about public figures and popular media for purposes of sex education, satire, transformation, and critique, hence falls under fair use regarding copyright and free speech regarding defamation obscenity laws, also known as the Miller Test. If you want to read the rest of that, you can. Just pause the screen here. Content warning: classical artistic nudes, oil painting, female nipples, bikini-style pinups and cleavage, e.g. boobs and butt cracks, fascism, genocide, and rape, meaning for my definition, to disempower someone or somewhere, a person, culture, or place in order to harm them, police brutality and carceral violence, whorephobia, racism, and queerphobia of different kinds, and Gothic poetry and violence, especially vampires and blood, for you squeamish out there. Also, before I start, I will say that even though I feel like the material on this page isn't really that risque, it's no worse than you'd see in, say, a swimsuit edition of Sports Illustrated, models in bikinis, essentially. It's still something that YouTube generally won't tolerate, so anything that has something that I feel like YouTube might have a problem with, I'm going to skip it or crop it in such a way so that you can only see part of the image and not the entire image. Taste test, or a cryptonymy sample concerning tokens and poetically parsing them, featuring Cuwu. Want to hit it from the back, little man? Cuwu showing me the ropes, playing the mommy dumb despite being trans to help me come out and play. Vampires are dualistic, thus potentially tokenized in ways we'll have to parse on the job, i.e. learning while on the job from others who, seemingly younger and more green, above model and artist Cuwu and Persephone Vanderward, are actually the veteran of things we ourselves have only dreamt about, e.g. Cuwu giving me the green light to rebellion, all while tapping that fat, skinny thick ass, as they put it, and saying green, bright green, a siren song slicing through the state alarm bell cacophonies to wake me up further than I already was. The cake is a lie, and ass war is class war to lie as needed, meaning poetry equals perception, to illustrate consent as seemingly up for grabs during Little Gothic BDSM, or to quote Mercutio, as dreamers in their beds at night, while going to Queen Mab and her delicious doubles below. Don't rule out paradox. Nudity isn't weakness or vestigial, but strength doubling as useful code, ready to pounce, rower, cryptonymy and abjection. Here's a sample to encourage you to taste your own cakes and pies, Alice in Wonderland. Or cream pies. An onion to peel, a strip to tease, shaking this or that. Poster, model, and artist Cuwu and Persephone Vanderward. Vampires are dualistic, thus potentially tokenized in ways we'll have to parse on the job, i.e. learning while on the job, from others who seemingly younger and more green are actually the veteran of things we ourselves have only dreamt about. A.G. Cuwu giving me the green light to rebellion, all while tapping that fat, skinny, thick ass and saying green, bright green, the siren song slicing through state alarm bell cacophonies to wake me up further than I already was. The cake is a lie, and ass war is class war to lie as needed, meaning poetry equals perception to illustrate consent as seemingly up for grabs during Little Gothic BDSM. Or, to quote Mercutio, as dreamers in their beds at night while going to Queen Mab and her delicious doubles below. Don't rule out paradox. Nudity isn't weakness or vestigial, but strength doubling as useful code, ready to pounce, rower, cryptonymy and abjection. Here's a sample to encourage you to taste your own cakes and pies, or cream pies, Alice in Wonderland. An onion to peel, a strip to tease, shaking this or that, to rattle this or that, pussy on the chain wax, and open our eyes using forbidden sight as knowledge in the flesh, if you give a mouse a cookie. Discerningly hot, and open about such things, despite looking normal in clothes below. Cuwu taught me the same basic skills my work now preserves, my memory of them. Much of that is in photos, but also in my writing keeping those memories, so many things worth remembering, happily alive. Cuwu, something of a vampire themselves, who after Zool bit my closeted ass to lay the dragon's egg, so to speak. RE, essay number 12. Part 2, Victim of Changes. Cuwu helped it hatch by repeatedly biting what had already been bit, a compound radicalism we'll touch on more deeper inside. Forget once bitten, twice shy. I was doubly eager to seek more and more. Not bitter at all, but ready and willing to play that special kind of game Capital doesn't sell, coming out of the closet 6 months after meeting Cuwu, or coming out as trans, 2022. It's not just the meeting of someone that changes your life, but also the indelible impression they leave on you afterwards. Regarding looking normal in clothes, when they weren't trying to turn me on, get my attention that is, they were fun, mischievous, a little lovable imp who had both seen and done too much, but still wanted to do more in ways that were healthier and safer than their actual past. For context, this was when we were at Cuwu's place, but these 3 images, Cuwu was taking me somewhere else. We were in a hotel. They had a Holy Bible next to the bed. They tore out this page and used it to roll a blunt. I digress. Here's a small tangent about tokenism and exposing marginal traders during the cryptonymy process, specifically the short version, including Cuwu, the self-described vampire fae. We'll also consider revolutionary cryptonymy and transgressive nudism more, and footnote 10. Gothic as such is riddled with ambiguity for trouble in comparison, and vampiric mastery in seemingly unlikely places above, i.e. for predator and prey is going both ways, re. Prey as liberators, 2024, meaning workers can prey on owners and vice versa, but also can serve owners in bad faith, hunting minorities while being marginalized, e.g. TERFs and SWERFs, but also black moderates and reactionaries, which overlap as needed to tokenize. See my anti-racist compendium. My focus combats tokenism, the latter using oppression and bad faith to conceal counter-revolutionary action that must be exposed on the daily. A good exposure method isn't the smell test or other senses alone, which can be fooled in different ways, but what I call the scratching method, or scratch and sniff, though that sounds terrible, i.e. reversing abjection to see how workers respond, and chart how they react to different things that get them to drop the mask. The magic mirror argument, as demonstrated previously against the Birdman, attacking what is sacred veneers to kinetically conceal predation with, that once scratched bleed fascist blood, which liberals are, just with more masks and steps, feed on it, then learn and evolve as needed to up the ante. Source thumbnail SA 10.5 Black Moderates Don't Challenge Fascism 2026. While many have concentric veneers that have to be pulled down first, above, thus peeling the onion, re. TERFs, NERFs, and queer bosses, which explores the queer and racial side of things, you can spare yourself a massive headache by cutting to the chase, by saying these magic words verbatim, to bait your foes, with talk being categorically cheap, thus easy to execute. Trans people are people, sex work is work, all cops are bad, fuck Nazis and free Palestine, and all indigenous lands. Better yet, pick one, meaning whichever issue you need and or want to highlight, but start quick, punchy, and basic, something to rattle the easily rattled to betray themselves ASAP. It's not hard once learned, but it takes skill that nonetheless must be taught, and not in school. Cuwu's tutelage of me, student master, and vice versa, below, being extracurricular. Artist, Cuwu, and Persephone Vanderward. And frankly painful without leaving lasting harm, visible marks. Remember your aftercare. Weird attracts weird, the scar the lesson through news stories and nostalgia that don't harm either side in the present or the future, breaking capitalist realism in the process upon ourselves, in keeping with but also building on Marx to empathize with the whore, already abject under nuclear models, is to lead capital, the state, towards better things, a never before, stateless, classless, moneyless, raceless, and genderless or fluid, infinite existence that treats sex and asexuality as two sides of a given exchange, work or otherwise, though work defines workers, which under communism become needers, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need, versus work, which socialism is, paving the road. The way to a whore's heart is through their holes, the ferryman's fee often simply being nice towards something weird, looking for fun. Trust is built among the heartbreakers. Two of hearts. I need you, I want you. From there, and equipped with the muse's tools of the trade, whores or otherwise, you can deal with, navigate the traps of more skilled bad actors, token or otherwise, including their trap-like language. However, most traders never get that far, many accustomed to brute force versus undercover methods, or the steep cost and long investment. It takes too much work, and capital state predation, profit and productivity pimping nature, is all about easy access, that quick and dirty exploitation while maintaining the lie. So cut through armor and illusion to gauge someone else's worth laid bare, or your own. Sing through everything else. The Sphinx's proverbial riddle, not always a question, but a test that paradoxically, through paradox, reveals just as fast who's the hunter, who's the game, as Scandal puts it, specifically a statement judging a response to decide what to do next per case. So is worthiness not a value judgment, but dialectical material criticism surviving traders before after they expose themselves. Bait and switch, my dudes, starting with minimal effort before putting on the heat, meaning without having to lift a finger or take off your clothes, unless you want to already have, Cuwu. Be succinct, but alluring in ways that get your foes to drop their guard while you, tits out, and seemingly on the hip, while under the gun below, have your enemies right where you want them. As war is class war, and class war intersects with culture and race to liberate or exploit sex work, therefore all work, cryptonymy, and ejection. Again, this cuts both ways, our cryptonymy and abjection of unpaid labor versus other workers infiltrating our groups monomyth style, for a centralized authority who will pay them should they succeed, so-called dark money, but also that of their peers baying for minority blood, including that of other minorities eating each other under criminogenic conditions. Blood money changes hands while aping the colonized among themselves per enclosure. The sooner you complicate that, the sooner you can gum up the works, and show yourself to be a tougher nut to crack than is deemed worthwhile, they'll have long since dropped the mask, moving on to greener pastures to exploit, and you'll have exposed them as bad faith, which again is entirely our goal when combating betrayal, of class, culture, and race, through any mask they might wear to divide and conquer themselves and us, as where we are, or where the dogs are shitting, as Chris Cornell puts it, outshine them. Fuck to metal, but also be it, doing so in ways speaking honestly and dishonestly to each other, workers, as needed, e.g. girl shit, use the bathroom alongside those treating like girls below. In turn, beauty is only a curse if you let it. The same thing's a potent weapon in the right hands with the right instruction. A Cuwu, an enthusiastic stoner, read eco-socialist and fervent Marxist-Leninist, often called pretty privilege, but I digress, with style and panache, cool under pressure as fuck when our foes are lame. The paradox of sex and asexuality is that many show conceal different things to get different things. Our needs don't always match, and we can get hurt when push comes to shove, an extinction burst. Hurt, not harm, the chase simply part of the game we all play, and not just Cuwu and I, e.g. macabre storytelling, see Male Dating and Sex Struggles Part 2, A Final Word, whose prior video, Male Dating and Sex Struggles, A Problem in Plain Sight, motivated me to learn and experience better forms of relating to others, sex or otherwise, but often combining them during holistic study. For me, this often meant Cuwu, more than meets the eye, but also front and center in their own brand of witchcraft, one casting a spell on me, no slouch myself, in the old spell-casting department, a student master and voyeur exhibitionist. Mix and match, my dudes. Hex whoever using your own voodoo dolls, though preferably in quotes with irony, provided it leads to systemic reductions of abuse. Cuwu helped me craft Little Gothic BDSM. Now take it and use it yourselves on the ages. The mask and the mirror, the Gorgon. The mask and the mirror equals the Gorgon and similar beings above and below. Such is simply how humans operate and have before masks or mirrors of the material sort, i.e. good or bad, and a dialectical material refrain that doubles during oppositional synthesis, punching up, meaning our daily habits to cultivate and synthesize praxis versus bad actors, on Twin Trees, and the basics of oppositional synthesis, 2024. So Cuwu rescued me from harm, then gave me all the things to sell and share as I wished, all provided I kept their real name out of it, of course. Returning to Volume 1, 2 years later, give or take, after 5 books, our Cuwu's hand in forming Little Gothic BDSM, 2025. And so I have, laboring to selective secrecy while turning them into part of the show, one that must go on with or without them outside these posters. They took me apart and learned what makes me tick, but I did the same with them, and through this unsteady and exciting exchange as lesson, warts and all, continue to impart lessons, wisdom, that seems fatal, but paradoxically isn't, the gateway to heaven and hell by marrying the two, and using bad puns that sound harmful but again aren't, e.g. fuck, slay that pussy, to storm my castle, or simply more, often how such campy things play out in practice, and inside the pussy or asshole. Learn from the nymphs to befriend them, i.e. as part of a better cause than simply raping the world one more time. Bodies, booties, or otherwise, are made to be hidden and shown, voyeur exhibit, thus dressed up and engaged with, spankings or otherwise, however workers toil under state surveillance, not to completely fool the enemy, but mislead, overwhelm, and confuse them just as well. This and healing walk hand in hand, or sword in sheath, but I digress, i.e. healing from rape. Such are the joys of meeting a wild cutie who chooses to show themselves and take part, i.e. often only for a short window of time, but one to capture through a polity of vantage points, communicating that which resists exposure that classically survives on stage in gilded mysteries, e.g. ninjas and kabuki theater, seeing the audience and the performers asking the same question, were ninjas real? Max Miller's This Recipe Took 3 Years, Ninja Kikatsugan, 2025. Whores are ninjas, including proudly slutty ones, still infiltrating this or that, heart to break, versus something a bit more veiled, e.g. Berlin Kakats, or Joy Under Fascism, 2025. The Princess in the Tower, Eating the Dragon or vice versa, The Lady of the Shallot, as I put it, taking from Lorena McKenna, taking from Tennyson, but also being the dragon or the knight, etc., as things to hyphenate, confuse, and play, however workers need to reclaim ourselves. Fight bravely in ways that inspire others to answer the call, come what may. Do it. Show, censor, whatever you need to, milking Medusa and her parts, cryptonymy and objection. Paint yourself and your friends. Paint over them, above. Abbreviate to slogans that cut the fat, get the gist, preferably personifying either to ready-to-eat in ready-to-eat ways, e.g., rattle cages, not join them, or whatever fits on a billboard. This chicanery? He's done worse. That billboard? Are you telling me that a man just happens to fall like that? No, he orchestrated it. Try it yourselves, and pull a Jimmy to rob the owner class and their dogs, stone blind. A fool and his money are parted soon. The owner class are already charlatans, so fight fire with fire, i.e., so long as it endears you to worthy friends helping the cause and avoids literal to figurative sticky situations like Lalo shooting Howard in the dome, but I digress, i.e., so-called blowback. Fight through the pain while bearing it all and duping your predators in the bargain. Any language, a mask, and a sign, bodies or otherwise, make invasion impossible for them and exposure all but guaranteed. Out whoever as having taken the soup through any tokenized refrain, e.g. black skin, white masks, or gaslight gatekeep girl boss. Fight soup with soup, paint with paint, sometimes literally, with soup as paint below. Sourced Associated Press's Climate Protesters Throw Tomato Soup of Van Gogh's Sunflowers, 2022. Threaten norms, the status quo accordingly, and all to defend people and other animals, all part of the environment, over property. However gross it seems, Girardi that shit. Some might prefer Molotov cocktails, but same idea. Also, I'm being poetic here, because it's more flexible, less useful to our cause. In any event, assimilation is poor stewardship, and silence is death, segregation no defense, etc. So speak out in ways that show conceal whatever you need to maximize advantage, minimize risk. Take whatever the state sees as automatically violent, and make it seem meek, but for those who know among us. Bitch, please, we mock among you. In other words, vampires hypnotize and penetrate, which goes both ways inside the cage. To rage, however, work is required to win the war. Are you winning, son? Wait and see, but also come and see. Take part in the spectacle when the true rebellion demands. Don't settle for surface-level methods that require a lot of setup and deliver something akin to 60% of the time. It works every time. Girl, no. Use it works every time. Penetrating to the heart of other vampires non-invasively to see what's lurking there, dragons or otherwise, Cuwu loving dragons but also vampires, re challenging the state's manufactured stupidity, 2024. Clues can be found on the surface within thresholds, re Sedgwick, but penetrative action must occur if we're to get anywhere substantial. Trace the bloodline to the source, but do it without harming anyone, as tactical frivolity aspires to, and let them expose themselves in Promethean self-destructive ways that speak to sellouts among the wretched of the earth. Whether out of convenience and or desperation, betrayal is betrayal, but whose masks, however dense and opaque they seem, can be used in duality to anisotropically reverse their terror-counter-terror function, i.e. to help, not hinder workers by showing and revealing this or that, as required to empathize with mid-camp. We neutralized it. Complete protonic reversal. It's Miller time. Exhibit 100A3 from Trans TERFs, NERFs, and Queer Bosses. Cryptonymy is layered and dualistic inside a hall of mirrors. 2024. Disguised prestige through concentric veneers, gobstopper masks stems from an internalized desire for cops to employ compound subterfuge to defend the state. Some persons might be centrists who are duped by fascists, making them accidental or fascists, complicit with their ideas. Many more are fascists in bad faith, requiring gender parity/trouble to make crypto-fascists posture as progressive, centrist, or simply not Nazis to gag or shit their pants, self-reporting in the most ignominious manner possible. Once the mask drops or breaks, centrists can be outed as conservative instead of their more polite-sounding disguises like gender-critical, which is difficult to recover from. For conservatives, they can always posture as strong, another mask, unless they are humiliated in ways members of their own den won't tolerate or explain away. Their insecurity is our greatest weapon. while humanizing our enemies, i.e. by teaching them to love us and each other by dismantling the source of darkness and division, the state. Sometimes we don't have that option. We become required to make fascists gag or defecate mid-Cryptonymy by simply being ourselves, i.e. in ways we know will upset them, thus drop the mask. Flashing, breeding, rapist-ish play, and nudism is a means of attacking our own insecurities as cultivated by the state by reclaiming the instruments thereof. More of this in Chapter 5. Model and photographer Cuwu and Persephone Vanderward. So was Cuwu, my Gorgon, and little dragon above, to invigilate and artistically reanimate, i.e. the little freak and fighter, who love to be ravished, and to help their friends in deeply numinous ways, make Cryptonymy reversing objection. So has this been a taste of what they offered me, and so does Medusa Lives echo, there's still life in the old lady, or trans man, yet. Whatever the course of action and gender, get it, girl. Indeed, stab them on Weathertop, separating the wheat from the chaff, traitors from rebels, to poetically teach consent as a vitally mutual equation, and all without the enemy's knowledge, before, after. Little Dragon taken from Bruce Lee, a Hong Kong cha-cha dancing champion who showed that power comes in small packages on all registers, i.e. as a lover and a fighter, but also actor and activist. Same idea with Cuwu, also a dancer, and just as much an activist and drug user as Bruce was, though perhaps a bit more caked up than Mr. Skin and Bones. See further down. Also, fun fact, Chinese dragons, unlike their Western counterparts' vice-like characteristics, are considered sources not only of strength, but luck, vitality, and wisdom, not unlike vampires. Bruce was frankly, if not one of a kind, and certainly one in a million. He blazed trails that continue to burn long after his death, teaching us, girls, and trans men how to kick ass, with me loving his movies and VHS. Water can flow, or it can crash. Be like water, friend. Regarding Bruce's drug use and other characteristics. Playing folk heroes in his films, Bruce, though admittedly being what black folk would call bougie, middle class, not unlike Dr. MLK, also conspicuously fought for equal rights among all non-white workers on and off stage, and did hard drugs, had affairs. It was the 60s, after all. If Bruce taught us anything, it's don't strive for moral perfection or purity, i.e. in the dump site. Instead, use the trash therein, dump trucks or otherwise, to wage war in visible rebellion, i.e. that gives your transgressive nudism an invisible shield per Cryptonymy that, if done well, might yield far-reaching socio-material effects and echoes, e.g. Sailor Jupiter above. So is rebellion half-real, as I argue, and rebellion and scandal aren't mutually exclusive in that respect, nor are the masculine and the feminine, whatever the form the monstrous feminine takes. But we should all be so lucky as to live such full and memorable lives as Bruce Lee once did. Indeed, I feel like I already have, minus the fame and fortune I fear. I fuck with dragons, including Cuwu as my little dragon, only for a moment, of course. 10 out of 10 would fuck again, to flow and crash against that fat ass. The legend lives on, something to seek and emulate during fresh forays into the endless unknown. Artist laughed Bruce Lee, write Cuwu and Persephone Vanderward. Such things only start small, canonizing or camping the Holocaust by revisiting the gravesite. For the state, they point and laugh before turning us slowly into merch for their witch hunters to wear and worship as they do. And we, growing up with similar toys, feel confused but also desirous. To show you our monstrous selves, not as scary, at least not entirely, but lovable too. And real quick, I just want to watch this clip.
Scary.
Ari, feel confused but also desirous to show you our monstrous selves not as scary, at least not entirely, but lovable too, i.e. in a raw honesty, one bare and exposed that seems to ask the Phantom of the Opera without his mask. If we can't stand to share, or be seen in each other's company, then what chance do we possibly have? Whores are monsters with the power to love and change the world in spite of that fact, nay, all the more for it, i.e. our hearts on our sleeves, our money where our mouths are, to show you where the red fern grows, and other bushes. We are the dead, short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow. Source, Flandersfield, 1915. However oxymoronic that sounds or feels, let stories like Cuwu's and mine, and similar lovers above, warm and give you courage in the dark days that follow. Stabbing as I have at the ghosts of the past, still a better love story than Twilight, also above. Let that transfer and nourish you. Writing as I do, as though already dead, seeing illicitly prurient, or at least forbidden connection with the dead of night, brought to light of day. Aren't we all? I'd say men have killed for less. They have. Usually some colorful ribbons, if you ask Napoleon, but the lever is always sex. That thing the state polices more than anything through force to maintain its iron grip on the planet, Athens to America, and hang over the heads of those who dare just give it away for free, beheading such homewreckers to steal and commodify their bargaining chips through the usual pimp whore refrains, dowries and plunder. Drive it home, then keep going wherever Medusa, Lady Communism herself, leads you to. That's success. What the best revenge is made of is what we whores of Gothic communism are all about. Next, before we get to the Superman essay, I wanted to respond to Angela Benedict's reply to me, which I will explain here. Here's the reply itself in their comment section, as I showed earlier in my YouTube community post. Benedict's reply, however bad faith, pernicious, and gotcha, read lazy, it feels, raises a curious point. It's ironic to condemn prejudice while stereotyping someone's ethnicity based on appearance, referring to my lily-white ass, pasty white, but go on, and assuming my background because of my skin tone is still racial bias. I'm Sicilian, Filipino, and Chinese, but the real issue is the contradiction in claiming to oppose judgment while engaging in it yourself. Me. To be frank, comrade, I was referring to your corpse paint, which is lily white, not your ethnicity, but if you felt otherwise, I apologize all the same, and will make a note of clarifying to readers. You're Chinese, Filipino, who wears lily white corpse paint, though perhaps not on your ass. Regardless, you're still a prude and a swerve who, regardless of the color of your actual ass, is still gatekeeping Gothic, i.e. in ways that, now that you mention it, feel pretty white, or like Anita Bryant. Though you're right, assumptions are harmful, and non-ethnically white people can also be gatekeepers within capital, a predominantly white European system that bears out white qualities adopted by other ethnic groups. These groups shouldn't be described as incapable of doing such things, e.g. Fanon's black skin white masks, or Coulthard's red. Same idea with Chinese and Filipino, so I will make a note of that as well. Source comments, Goth has a brain rot problem. Notice how Benedict only played the race card, meaning her only leg to stand on, and a notably shaky one, to it, let's sweep the leg, or more, point out the trolley problem / anchor she's tied herself to, below. 1. I was specifically referring to Benedict's face paint when I wrote pasty white ass, which I know isn't ass paint, so I will clarify, not to Benedict, but the audience. Her Italian, specifically Sicilian and Chinese Filipino ass. So what? Racially token people can still be racist and bougie, insofar as their actions, words, or otherwise punch down at activism to maintain whorephobic power structures, i.e. with a white, straight, and patriarchal nucleus defended by token bad actors in the goth community emblematizing gaslight gatekeep girlboss, or as Cinzia Aruza writes in Feminism for the 99%, a manifesto, we have no interest in breaking the glass ceiling while leaving the vast majority to clean up the shards. Far from celebrating women CEOs who occupy corner offices, we want to get rid of CEOs and corner offices. Feminism must be anti-capitalist, eco-socialist, and anti-racist. It must also, I argue, be pro-sex work, lest the same old Cartesian sins continue. R.E. Patel and more. 2. I don't recall saying I'm above anything. Bitch, please. I grew up in southeast Michigan and had to consciously overcome my racism. And even then, it's possible to still make mistakes. Shit happens. And 3. Ethnically non-white people can still be swerves, and more to the point, act white accordingly. The idea comes from Fanon, but it isn't unique to him, being a concept Gothic has explored for centuries, regarding the colonial powers and assimilation under police violence that Fanon only discussed in 1952. In your case, Benedict, you're literally wearing white face paint and acting like Morticia Addams, a bougie play if ever there were, but specifically the neoliberal gentrified version post-90s, i.e. played after Angela Hudson and Carolyn Jones, both notably white women, by Catherine Zeta-Jones, who, though she often codes as Latina in films, e.g. Wednesday, but also the Zorro movies, is actually Welsh. If she can do it, so can you, just in a slightly different visual way that has the same socio-material outcome. Appropriation and vampirism. In fact, swap the black mask and cops and robbers appropriation of Central American culture for a North American one, and you have the general idea, though Banderas, shown with Zeta-Jones below, source Jessica Weidenmeyer's CZJ hopes the Mask of Zorro isn't cancelled 2021, is Castilian and European non-Arab Spanish, made famous in Spanish director Pedro Almodovar's Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, and Mexican-American director Robert Rodriguez's own bandit vaudeville, echoed in neo-Gothic novels demonizing Italians and other non-Anglo groups. But I digress. Similar to Batman, Zorro was playing at a bandit, though it depends on the legend below. Whatever the mask, acting and multiculturalism remain dualistic, dialectical material like anything. The point being, race is just as much a social construct as gender is, i.e. something to perform, often hand in hand with other intersecting factors advocating for or resisting austerity, the core feature of fascism. To it, and as I write in Pigtail Power 2025 on Gothic heroines, who were classically detectives, white or otherwise. The female detective ostensibly rejects compulsory sexuality, the societal endorsement of sexual desire as natural, normal, and rewarded on every register, though especially physical appearance, a dark spoof of the American puritanical wasp, emphasis me, R.A. John the Duncans, A Funhouse Mirror, The Addams Family, and the failure of Netflix's Wednesday 2023, haunted by death and rape, serial murder, and so on. I say ostensibly because Wednesday Addams from Wednesday exemplifies as non-white, and Ace, vocalizing her disdain for sexual love. I'm not like you, mother, she says. I will never fall in love, get married, have children. The praxis here is semi-canonical. Netflix making Wednesday's parents Latin American, again coded as such, largely feels appropriative, i.e. functionally white, blue-blooded do-gooders conspicuously loaded with old money. While bourgeois Marxism is entirely possible provided it quickly delineates from the status quo, it very much needs to be recognized amid the neoliberal AAA conventions that celebrate ostentatious wealth as the best means of achieving social sexual activism. To this, Wednesday's biggest failing is the setting itself, a magical boarding school for rich kids, which strongly reeks of assimilation fantasy in both directions. The desire to go to such a school, the entire world is like the school, an ideological site that brands activity for a select group, those who can afford the tuition fees. I much prefer Andor, or a Marxism in space, whose widespread holistic revolution incorporates working and owner-class peoples into a grand collective action against capitalism. Emphasis me. In post-colonial theory, black, white are abstract, not concrete. In turn, white can be performed by anyone, regardless of skin color, R.A. Fanon and Coulthard, but also my arguments above. Zeta-Jones can act brown when she is Welsh. Taylor Sheridan's white Indians and non-indigenous women, specifically Thai, skip intro, timestamp 2448, can appropriate the struggles of actual indigenous peoples playing the role in Yellowstone to whitewash and lionize white actors, or non-white actors acting white, playing Indians. James Cameron can hire black actors and actresses who happily do the same for blockbuster dollars. Mark Dacascos can play an indigenous American when he's actually Hawaiian, Filipino, and Irish Japanese. Ari Melissa Slaughter's Mark Dacascos Can't Cook 2022 cited Leaving the Closet 2024, and Benedict herself can act, self-typecast, and report as white despite being an ethnic combination of different non-white things, with Sicilians historically being treated as non-white in American read marginalized infighting among immigrants trying to assimilate, often in gangster narratives whose endless stereotypes they commodify participate in, similar to Irish Americans, hibernophilia, and plastic patties. Say nothing of that one scene from True Romance. I suspect Quentin Tarantino, a famous racist and someone who helped write the film's screenplay, if memory serves, probably wrote. I digress. Not being white doesn't, pardon the expression, give you carte blanche, or otherwise make you exempt from criticism, comrade. And to that, my critique of you didn't focus on race, though consider this entire footnote an addendum to my original thesis. Rather, it prioritized your whorephobia as decidedly fake in bad faith ways, to that another person also called you out above. Curature 1881 with typos. So, you are fake as shit. You are playing the game harder than most do. You might not be as cheesy or horny, but it's the same thing. Stop being jealous. Also, oh no, dudes pay attention to me and give me money. How horrible. Ugh. Nah, you just pissed that other girls are getting that money. Sorry, babe, you ain't goth number one. This isn't a pyramid scheme. Be nice and frick everybody else. Get your bread. Let them eat, too. If the shoe fits, Cinderella, with Disney engaging in rainbow capitalism all the time, racial and gender, Americans with Chinese, Filipino, Sicilian heritage can still be fake in whorephobic ways. It's all about what you do with the fakeness of Gothic reinvention, which you yourself, a token racial minority in the middle of rising fascism, are using to blame the whore. It's the oldest, again, pardon the expression, trick in the book. And tokens spent. Get spent, my dude. Your face paint may as well be egg whites or whipped cream, but I digress, for all the egg it leaves on your face. Out damn spot. Or eating like Anita Bryant, likewise taking the soup. You even have the same initials. Source, Gregory, there's never been a time to watch Anita Bryant's Pie in the Face, 2024. Selling out is selling out, no matter who you betray along the way, or masks you wear. Quit sucking the state's dick, whose semen contains the nutrients of dead whores, their blood turned into blood money, you happily ingest, while sucking on our necks too. You are what you eat, tit for tat. Anita Bryant, being a Southern Baptist who was, despite her mixed heritage, 1/8 Cherokee, as a matter of fact, remained a massive bigot until the day she died. Upon her death at age 84, Anita Jane Bryant was remembered most vividly for her harsh stance against homosexuality in the 1970s, and not for the successful music career that preceded her advocacy. Source, Wingfield's Anita Bryant, dead at 84, remembered for what she opposed, 2025, or as GLBTQ notes, who put the G before the L, which is curious. Anita Bryant's career started out as an American success story. Born into poverty in rural Oklahoma, she won a beauty pageant, became a popular singer, and was eagerly sought by Fortune 500 companies to advertise their products. She sang at the White House, never a good sign, was featured in People magazine, and co-hosted 8 Orange Bowl parade telecasts for NBC. But after becoming the poster girl for homophobia, her marriage dissolved and her career tanked. Bryant became a controversial figure in 1977 when she successfully campaigned against a local ordinance in Dade County, Florida, that prohibited discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. She then helped repeal similar laws in Eugene, Oregon, St. Paul, Minnesota, and Wichita, Kansas. She also inspired a major anti-gay initiative in California, which failed, an anti-gay law passed overwhelmingly by the Oklahoma legislature, which was ultimately ruled unconstitutional. Anita Jane Bryant was born March 25, 1940, in Barnesdale, Oklahoma. Her parents, an oil field worker and a housewife, divorced soon afterwards, remarried, and then broke up again. Since her father had a Native American background, Anita was 1/8 Cherokee, emphasis me. Bryant was raised primarily by her mother and her maternal grandparents in a strict Southern Baptist home. Unquote. Source image Matt Levides and Julian Eugenios. Anita Bryant, a former beauty queen turned anti-gay crusader, dies at 84. 2025, actually. The point here is it was far harder to find information about Bryant's non-white heritage than her white-coded actions, i.e. because she acted white and straight despite her material hardships, non-white and impoverished success story, and rape survival, allegedly being abused herself as a child. RE TLBTQ archive. To that, we're shaped by our environments, yes, but also by our own choices within said environments. Kill the Indian, save the man. And Bryant acted white and straight accordingly, which includes appearance above. It's the very redskin, white masks, and cunning recognition that Coulthard cautioned about, which emerged in the 1970s when Bryant was most active. Punch down as at minority and get a prize Skinner box style. To that, bigotry or not bigotry equals what you do, don't do, to combat socio-material oppression, be that Bryant's token homophobia or your token whorephobia and bad reputation. Both are bigoted on account of your being racially token women attacking queer sex workers, which often walk arm in arm. Again, being a racial minority doesn't make you above criticism, and playing the race card here just makes you look worse, i.e. hypocritically bad faith and or ignorant, take your pick. Race, a social construct, becomes a ceremony whose ongoing legacy opposes this or that, or Bryant, the gays, and Hughes, the sluts. Both of you, literal, racially token beauty queens. Bigotry is bigotry that pure aesthetics can empirically aid when used unironically. Do better. RE, to summarize, goth baddie, dressed like a vampire and plugging their shit while handing down dogma dominatrix style, says thing, and it sounds legitimate to a larger circus/cult, a one they can ringlead with plausible deniability, again in my opinion, tied to my academic work defending sex work. So yeah, this person, instead of engaging with anything that I wrote, pointing out what my problem with them was, it didn't have really anything to do with their ethnicity at all. Instead of addressing my arguments about their whorephobia, they play the race card as a shield, as something to prevent people or distract people from looking at what I was actually talking about. So I'm just going to take that, an arrow to my quiver, and shoot it right back into them, staking their heart, basically. They are a token, racially token goth who is whorephobic, which makes them racist because they're defending a system that preys upon people just like them, racial minorities that have to do sex work to survive, or otherwise. It doesn't matter. A swerf's a turf, and a turf's a fascist. And turfs also include racial minorities. Just something to keep in mind, comrade. I decided to include a small footnote, a segue into our essay on vampire Supermen. Let's examine things a bit more deeply using those devices. First, an essay on vampire Supermen, asterisk. A note before we start. As part of Interview with the Vampire shall be called Supermen, Sellouts, and Separating Them for the YouTube video. Supermen, Kal-El, or otherwise, tend to disguise themselves openly while walking among the populace, doing so similar to rulers of the East and the West of yore, e.g. Chinese emperors and Prince Harry from Shakespeare's Henry IV, Part 1, circa 1596, the latter befriending Falstaff to eventually heed his father Bolingbroke's words and duel Aider to the Welsh, Hotspur to finally claim his birthright, to ascend to the throne, divine right settled not by gods, but boys fighting boys for old men to grow old themselves. To separate them, we'll need the help of friends as much as theory, re. Ellie Reed's, and Cuwu, so keep those in mind as we proceed. Also, it bears repeating that such things are sold to workers from an early age. So while the essay examples are far more adult-coded, re. Invincible and Stalin, also remember that Mortal Kombat, 1993, was arcade-style Orientalism. It and Doom's family-friendly violence routinely sold to kids under a Protestant ethic. Speaking of Orientalism, here's a critical thinking exercise to levy against something a little cuter than Thragg and his minions, i.e. food for thought to get the old juices flowing before we tackle them head-on. Yoshi's Island, above, 1995. Cute, yes, but beneath the surface, the same old monomyth-grade metaphors stay at work, sold by sinister Japanese companies acclimating first-world kids surreptitiously to the Nintendo mantra, its name, heaven rewards hard work. The work, in this case, is force, the capitalist lingua franca, a military exercise under Pax Americana that does two basic things, sides of the same imperial coin. First, it simulates American foreign policy disguised as kids' media, and second, whose ensuing child's play gives an ongoing nostalgia, cunning means of curating the usual us versus them thinking that furthering abjection demands, and all its baked-in contradictions under crisis. There's nothing innocent or accidental about it. Such indoctrination a meta Bildungsroman that relies start to finish on all the usual propagandistic tools states abuse, i.e. to prey past, present, and future under monopoly capital, i.e. violence, terror, and monsters, enacted through Cartesian, settler colonial, and heteronormative stories. Never forget the world is their oyster, one to map out and chart endlessly through courses of cartographic domination, from coloring books to military field manuals. Same difference, and where Supermen of all walks come from, meaning origin stories, and generally sexless ones that paradoxically nucleate sex and the military-industrial complex in storybook forms, e.g. The Baby and the Stork from Yoshi's Island, yet another Trojan horse essentializing war and master-slave palingenetic ultranationalism in the minds of young, impressionable brains, those being repeatedly told over countless generations, "You're special provided you do this," re. Aristotle's "Until he is 7, and I will show you the man" adage, preying carceral style on men, women, and children. Monsters are made, capital making them, on assembly lines, bleeding into stories, hiding the factories. Don't believe me? Let's give it a shot, plying the shadows on Nintendo's cave wall with a gothically communist and short, dialectical material critique, one concerned with alien imposters recruiting from an ambiguous prison population to fleece the land, all while disguising their theft as home defense in the language of everyday heroism, i.e. from the jungle or the gutter to enact gang violence useful to the ruling class, saying, "Make yourselves useful," and back to work, all by using multimedia avatars, e.g. not just the Yoshis then, but Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and its endless reincarnations out from comic books into TV, movies, and video games. Watching Yoshi murder those monkeys with bullet seeds feels so ethnocentric, a Vietnam or similar allegory, when a local resident and rival of the different warring factions is normally indifferent but currently tasked with rescuing a superior white species baby from a witch or warlock lizard person, all anti-Semitic queer-coded tropes. It's basically the Twilight Zone movie, 1983, minus the helicopter crash landing on the actor and child labor, a well-playing white Indian, or rainbow capitalism with all the different Yoshis cunning recognition serving the Mushroom Kingdom, a jungle filled with tribal mercenaries, monkeys, gorillas with bombs, dropped ordnance, hostile flora and fauna, and various military objectives and power targets given a drug-induced haze, re. the Fuzzies, and in keeping score with Vietnam-style necropolitics and metrics counting the dead, Conan-style, is a literal scoreboard treated like American football, a nod to General Westmoreland, rallying the troopers to die on Hamburger Hills. Yoshi is Ellen Ripley, aka Girl Rambo for kids, swapping bullets and bombs for watermelon seeds, echoes of minstrel shows, and dinosaur eggs, hatched during South Vietnam saved from another draconian scapegoat, It's the good, Japanese-penned dragon, which Yoshi translates to, versus the bad, Baby Bowser, a second-chance gimmick to assassinate a communist-coded rival in the crib, valorizing the token immigrant, the player, in cutesy monomyth and completionist, centrist prestige sold to kids in perennial sequel forms. Source, YouTube community post, Persephone Vanderward, 5/7/2026, in response to You Can Beat Video Games. And there, Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island SNES Ultimate Guide, 2026. America has been at war for virtually its entire existence, and Japan, emulating America and the West before that, are their faithful allies, former foes who bent the knee, only to get nuked for it, with Yoshi also being echoes of Godzilla in that case. Here, the get 'em while they're young approach, echoed by Comic, the game's cradle-snatching evil wizard abusing fairy dust to also scapegoat above, segues easily enough to more nakedly fascist examples later in life, the one-man army in a ward game, which a dragon Superman vampire basically is, Ari, the Promethean quest, and James Cameron's military optimism in Metroid, but in a deliberately emotionally anemic society predicated on underdeveloped infrastructure, overabundant and oversold military tech, shortages of this or that, often sex, bread and circus, and infiltration through false flags meant deciding workers from cradle to grave, geography as destiny, and bloodlines presenting as larval eggs shielding the aggressor, pimping nature as whore. Your brood is bad, rotten, black, what have you, making omelets from witches' eggs in bad faith. Below. Source, Ashley Falls, The Art of the Movie poster, Kenny Gravelis on Alien 2018, artists Steve Frankfurt and Philip Gibbs. Such is state predation through cryptonymy and objection as complicit and furthering factors therein. To reverse them and cease predation, thus aid workers punching iconoclastically up at such things, we must critique what we eat and respond accordingly. Heaven and a wildflower, kids. The power is yours, but you gotta kill your darlings, cracking their eggs, or bursting their bubbles to expose the foul yolk inside, chicken or the egg, while valorizing our own, as nonetheless demonized by nuclear models colonizing us out of revenge. Egg equals female or baby queer waiting to hatch, but I digress. Skull equals theft. Vampire equals flow plus skull is something to cloak the shell of the egg when placed inside the home nuclear model, and Gothic equals vampire home or death egg come home to roost. Nature is monstrous feminine, but also bad actors mimicking nature to pimp it, Tolkien's included, Amazons and other superheroes maintaining the status quo by policing nature and sex through force, white Indians, black planets, whores policing whores, workers eating themselves for state hegemons. We can subvert such things through play, demonizing nuclear reproduction for framing us like homewreckers, child abusers, and rapists, etc., but doing so during Little Gothic BDSM is always emergent, iconoclastic, and revolutionary, cracking the case, peeling the onion, parting the veil, etc., meaning in ways states will identify as threat, and concentrically cage, kettle, and kill on sight, with their own eggs passed off as ours, counterfeits and their ghosts, or atypically in Freudian language, the workers canonize or camp accordingly. The key to your identity is hidden in your childhood, says Mochi. I would respond, yes, and inside the home as a restless symbol of invaded, preoccupied space, one that cryptonymically furthers or reverses objection, where the abusers and victims but also survivors are found, dancing in the ruins. Truth is dualistic, too, as is falsehood. In other words, it's the rebellion and Gothic poetry of dark transformative power, performative in service to states or workers, dragon's fire, fire of the gods, mad science, black magic. The Gothic walks the line between fantasy and science fiction to offer up half-real solutions, i.e., to worker problems and state problems alike, and their respective rights and questions regarding said rights. As we proceed, apply the same poetic praxial ideas to more gruff and bellicose supermen, not women this time. State apologia, re Darvo, and obscurantism all encapsulate the objection process and its grim harvest as something to further make cryptonymy any which way, though often through neoconservative strength, prepackaged and resold to kids by traders, poster moms, specifically chaste frontiers women, warrior Madonna turfs and swerfs, each aping Anita Bryant when taking the soup to complete a given cycle of genocide. This time, it's war. Or any crusader criminalizing this or that when staging war, playing war games. Criminalization doesn't protect groups, women, children, or otherwise. It preys upon target groups by taking away their rights. To that, People would keep on breathing if the state outlawed respiration, but the state would see itself as having the right to punish selectively, of course, anyone who breathes. In the same breath, so to speak, sex work will continue regardless if it's legal. The people involved will just have less rights, turning to sex work to try and support themselves while the state dies and criminalizes this or that to stay in power. Criminality equals control, states' rights to rape workers, full stop. Anyone who hands control over to the state is a cop. Token cops the worst ones of all, the witches policing their own, a nun in whore's clothes, colonizing brothels for the man, re. Angela Benedict, a racial minority, selling out to protect God, and nonsensically keep it pure from prurient invasion, little more than a Stygian pimp selling other women down the river. Love letters, essays, and rememory, on tyrants and their charm, or sacking Troy from within while castrating Nazi strongmen, a mini-essay about vampires, capital, and nation-states from outer space, featuring Stalin, Superman, DBZ, and Invincible, etc. Now you've got a gal in your wrecked truck with a missing leg that's now missing? Sheriff Haig, Planeteer, 2007. Earlier we mentioned missing things, so here's a brief tangent mini-essay about the charming side of state vampires, namely strongmen from those siding with state power, often by embodying it and its earthly otherworldly temptations, while these factors complicate, i.e. the likes of Stalin, the Z-fighters, and Thragg, who will unpack inside, doing so in duality across holistic studies of power as such, is caught between splinters of wish fulfillment and guilty pleasure, injecting the injured with trauma, and something to smuggle forwards, better lessons than before, Cryptonymy, and objection. This often happens in trash, schlock, and other misfit, easy-to-camp forms, playing Brutus, e.g. so-called phallic women, made whole through the poetic application of violence to speak their truth. Battle makes her feel alive, killing her enemies in highly gratuitous and fetishized ways, as Cherry Darling does above, i.e. reifying power between exploitation and liberation, seeking this or that. That boy's got the devil in him, yes, but also at his back, the enemy at the gates, as much an Athenian debutante, a secret warrior princess threading the line between virgin horror and damsel demon. Thus reparations, while famously costly for the state, can also be quite fun for the denizens of the Gather, through razzle-dazzle, TNA, gender trouble, etc. We make it gay in ways that set the queer free, versus bank on it below. Artist Jan Durasema, cited Cruisin' for a Bruisin', 2024. Note, this essay dedicates to Vivian Strange, whose own essay Superman Isn't Punk, I cite elsewhere in this document, shared with her permission. I also dedicate it to Thought Slime, whose own pithy examination of James Gunn, Get Me Superman's Underwear, I Am Normal, inspired my work on Superman and similar Supermen on stage and off, e.g. Gunn's Brightburn, 2019, and Stalin. That includes here, but also sporadically throughout my book series, meaning when examining the same basic superhero pathology, e.g. both selling war as sacred and the fascism in disguise of male gatekeepers, 2024, but also Cruisin' for a Bruisin' above, dissecting ordinary characters like Copland's Common Man, which Heinlein's Competent Man would echo, re. Military Optimism, 2021, alongside more hyperbolic cases like Captain America and Wonder Woman, etc. There's power in these characters, power we can take and use for ourselves. Probe them. Pers. 5/3/2026. P.S. While I critique male action heroes in canonical narratives, I actually grew up with quite a few. Anything Mel Gibson, of course, though he sucks in real life, as well as Liam Neeson, Clive Owen, Michael Bain, and Paul Newman, etc. The brooding noir anti-hero on the western side of things, and Bruce Lee, Jet Li, Donnie Yen, and Jackie Chan, the Hong Kong sort on the eastern side, but also from non-movie examples, Zero from Mega Man X, 1993, and various male characters from David Gemmel's Swashbuckling Potboilers, a contemporary of George R. R. Martin, who had also read when he was new, Rage the Gladiator from Midnight Falcon, 1999, and James Grymoch from Ravenheart, 2001, who are generally outlaws and vagabonds with troubled pasts, similar to the reformed heroism of Arnold's T-800 from T2 Judgment Day, 1991. Needless to say that while I focus these days on more effeminate GNC male characters, e.g. Link from the Zelda franchise, and female Amazons, take your pick, the classic male action hero isn't something I completely detest or discount, though many of my favorites either come from my youth and or are notably seeking redemption, e.g. Toshiro Mifune's Kikuchiyo from Seven Samurai, or Kevin Costner's Bud from A Perfect World, 1954 and 1993. In other words, I'm just more picky with and critical of male heroes, as we'll see in just a moment, or like them a bit rough around the edges. Think Conan the Barbarian, and you've got the right idea. With cishet men, I especially like them as villains, i.e. of the slasher sort being integral to Gothic rape fantasies, consent-non-consent, such as the Hunter from the Dark Crystal, Robert Patrick's sleekly eerie T-1000, though I actually prefer Arnold's evil T-800, Nick Castle as the Shape from OG Halloween, 1978, and so on. There's also a whole bevy of vice characters who, apart from classic anti-heroes like Milton Satan or Shelley's Creature, tend to be outright villains serving as broken clocks, but also who tend to be queer-coded even when ostensibly straight, i.e. theater nerds, e.g. Tolkien's Smaug in cartoon form, and James Earl Jones, Alan Rickman, and Christopher Lee as insert 80s cartoon villain here. The same also goes for Hugo Weaving's Agent Smith from The Matrix, anything with Charles Dance, or John Finch's 1971 Macbeth. Heroes are okay, especially if they feel more realistic, which the good guys generally don't, but villains are where it's at, where Cryptonymy and Objection can run wild, and where I generally have more to say when it comes to evil superheroes breaking bad, as Thragg does, which we'll explore here. Likewise, and in keeping with state predation as something they historically materially divorce, thus castrate the strong man, often from outer space, or some such curtain they cross over into normal spheres to exsanguinate the locals, Grover's Mill or otherwise. There's commonly no end to such princes of the universe. Aliens to hug and drape in moribund flags of war above. Artist Zlatislav Baczynski cited I Satanist Atheist, a Gothicist thoughts on atheism, religion, and sex, 2021. They're sold to us since birth, a false birthright promoting fictional godhood in hoc signo vinces, a dead language for a brain-dead race of warrior numbskulls saved for last. Cryptonymy and Objection, kayfabe is kayfabe, and no one group can monopolize it. Instead, such bodies are classically bred in circus to shock and awe viewers, mainly power fantasies to pilot and apologize for state force, avatars that workers do different things with, e.g. Zangief the Red Cyclone, and Capcom's neoliberal nation prestige, and wrestler hero worship, revived repeatedly decades after Reagan's 80s and Bush and Clinton's 90s to be adored by his loyal fans nowadays. Below. Exhibit 1A, 1A, 1H, 4A from interrogating power through your own camp. Just because centrist theater demands a bad guy for the good guy to punch doesn't mean we, as workers, should just unironically embrace this role and the historical materialism punching down that results from it. We can punch up and still enjoy being ironic heels who love our big, bearded, ostensibly gay himbo and protector of Russian skies, Zangief. As I've said already, many times, I adore such things, just not how the ruling class and petite bourgeois middlemen want me to, under capitalist socialist realism, a brainless spectacle but also dog whistle putting the usual dogs of war to heel, i.e. armed subservience. For example, I write in State Vampirism, per Marx and myself, capitalism alienates and sexualizes everything. Analyzing the larger historical material problem those factors perpetuate, state vampirism gazes through the unpaid labor umbrella, care sex work and natural forces, but focusing on sex in light of ongoing abuses committed by the state pimping nature as monstrous feminine, TERFs, fascist feminism. There's also fascist dogma and capitalist and socialist realism at large. In state eyes, we're the enemy or alien within as much as we are the barbarian outsider sacking Rome, Troy, or anywhere else, the wasp eating the caterpillar in duality. But so too do our enemies serve the state with equally splendid lies, which vampires are. To that, we're often charming the pants off each other, giving the other side our neck too, as Banquo put it, betrayest in deepest consequence. Never mind that Macbeth was the villain, and Banquo just another servant of different kings. Such is history, and Gothic reinvention making things up to suit our needs, R.E. Madoff, 1979, i.e. forever at odds and out of joint, during class wars having victus woe-is-me qualities that good and bad actors use at cross purposes, doing so alongside intersections of culture, sex work in our case, and race, but also monstrous feminine poetry modules to uphold or undermine state power in highly Promethean ways below. Such myths are extraordinarily productive, regardless of usage, and tokenism equals death for workers being something to resist, i.e. regarding tokenism and fighting it. artist Henry Fuseli cited on giving birth. The point here is how monstrous theater, specifically of nations and strength, wrestling this with that, date back to ancient times, and while echoing them in modern retro-future struggles, which practitioners empirically signal communicate through useful abstraction. The Gothic at large, pimps or whores, such things root in revenge, canonically in defense of the home, nuclear model from campy betrayers, which unruly whores are, but one's capital demands to generate profit with anyways. A from Shakespeare's Caesar and A to Brute, to more recent crossings of the fateful Rubicon, the Deaf River, which planetary destruction of the life-giving home neatly symbolizes, in ways that demand fresh blood, the Stygian impostor, worldly traveler, and aristocrat, drinking crimson life force sanguine versus ordinary water, such as the stuff of many vampires lifting larger-than-life qualities from the half-real past, all the better to eat you with, my dear. The paradox in reversing objection to change-state predation lies in camping its heroes, which means having dance partners who, apart from being flat-out weird, flat-footed, and or stronger than us, are also bad actors at least part of the time. Again, we use the same masks, costumes, and bodies when in Rome, and Rome was full of vampires then and now. Vampires charm. State vampires lie, Pygmalion style, and through a cycle of kings, to repopulate the earth in their image, a hubristic wackiness on its own, suitably tied to unequal power, as states afford and demand, e.g. billionaires, below, and one that isn't without its own binary magnetism. Wealth attracts the desperate, and all make of the same stuff, yes, but do and say different arguments mid-dialectic, through Gothic's useful abstractions borrowing from older pulp, including kayfabe and wrestling strongmen and women, or Amazonamachia, shaping capitalist realism currently. Viewers beware, no one reads Batman for the heroes, no one cool anyways, making possible exceptions for the Adam West version, a vamp in his own right, but still outshined by the villains, e.g. the immaculate and fabulous Eartha Kitt. See Greg McKevitt's How Eartha Kitt Rose from Extreme Poverty to Superstardom, 2025. Instead, people are attracted to vampires and similar vengeful terrorist beings, dissecting nuclear prescriptions in dialectical material pool, anti-capitalist actors, vice characters, anisotropically reversing the terror-counter-terror binary in duality, in turn, my prompting of others, deliberately advertising vampires instead of sex work and trans rights, at least up front, suddenly saw me not being gay-capped, i.e. meaning in all the usual ways the straights and puritanical tokens historically abused, theirs having that usual chilling effect tied to open discussions of queerness, BDSM, and sex work that corporations demonized by association, demonetized by association, for being apolitical, not family/advertiser-friendly, or making things gay, save for certain token examples, essentially male privilege, a tolerance for the homosexual theater nerd, comic book enthusiast, and/or cruising metalhead, e.g. on par with Shakespeare, Rob Holford, or Tim Curry's Dr. Frankenfurter, but also various slasher, face-of-bagel-style scapegoats like Stoker's anti-Semitic Dracula, or Angela Baker's intersex Bête Noire from Sleepaway Camp. Whatever the period and amniotic gel housing it, the campy allegory and subversive political function remain, i.e. making Marx ironically gay, a man whose entire canon existed at a time when the language of queerness was entirely abject, monstrous feminine, and still is for many Marxist-Leninists, embarrassingly nostalgic for imperial what-ifs playing Red Knights, below. Source: Comments for YouTube Community Post, Persephone Vanderward, 1/29/2026, cited The Price of Rice in China, 2026. This is not transphobic. Socialism is a historical necessity and the genuine liberation of LGBTQ+ people everywhere, not just in the first world, and only Marxism-Leninism can achieve and maintain socialism. Sex work is also inherently awful and demeaning. The majority of prostitutes are forced into it because they have literally no other option, and if you do it willingly, you are participating in a system that brings down your gender, as all pornography is inherently harmful to society and to yakety yak yak. To which I say, you're so wrong, it hurts. To which they say, Persephone Vanderward, tell me how I'm wrong. The same goes for what vampires attach to, commonly the land as predatory or cursed, and its leaders as being stunted statesmen, expected to deliver disproportionate violence to police their legacies tied to state predation. This arguably starts with Count Dracula for modern readers, but also historical figures like Vlad Dracul as aping Caesar. i.e. is demonized in ways that, out of the medieval period for which he lived and into retro-future histories, campily demonizing him through the eyes of those who survived his infamous wrath, can speak to current geopolitics haunted by similar problematic figures, e.g. Stalin, Russia, and Red Scare, which we'll compare to Thragg in a moment, that, while often overblown by horseshoe theory and tall tales, remains thoroughly saturated with the blood of that man and nation's enemies, i.e. under Marxist-Leninism as having its own flaws, problem areas like America and its comic books do. I don't read comics, but I love critiquing them through selective reading, courting the gods, the whore of Babylon sacking this or that, R.A. the iconoclast when in Rome, making such things political/gay, R.A. camping the canon to expose state lies on the hip. Rape survivors calculate risk, reverse objection by camping our holocausts to upend status quo norms. For state defenders on either side of the ocean, though, it's historically far easier to blame the whore and or rape victim, i.e. as harlot and hysterical, kettling the whistleblower during reactive abuse, than it is to critique state leaders and systems and myth stereotypes they embody, e.g. me being a rape survivor and granddaughter to a Holocaust survivor and Dutch resistance member, who other activists repeatedly attack and pimp during trans-genocide below. Sorth, Jonathan Chatwin's The Girls Mao Zedong Had Sex With 2022 cited Mao's vampirism, bad empanada's favorite dictator, from raising awareness. Nation-states, by their very design, are predatory through imperialism, monopoly, aka late-stage capitalism, which gentrifies and decays, i.e. as something that, beyond its aforementioned age before Stalin, became synonymous with the man himself and his own apologia doubling American strongmen, of various friendships signed in blood, and women's rights betrayed, e.g. Mao, a famous womanizer preying on peasant women, above, but also degenerate queerfolk by so-called great man theory and its avatars of war, doing all the usual things dictators do, as they an empire decay naturally or otherwise, e.g. the so-called proletariat Stalin and company embodied, signifying a power imbalance that kept things top-down, favoring patriarchy as heteronormative, misogynistic, and racist to varying degrees compared to China and America. Also, it turns out, and to no one's surprise, if they're trans, cis supremacist, a brick wall I often encounter by weird fans of the dude, though every so often am mercifully met with approbation for daring to say what most cis MLs apparently will not. Sorsky, Lucio James, Jaimes, 5/6/2026, in response to Vanderward Arts' The Price of Rice, Skeet, 4/20/26. Come on, work, damn it. Because the left movement as a whole is so sexual dominated, even today, and I have the belief that the voices of the ignored are the most worthy of being heard. R.E. The Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. Your critique of Stalin is great and something I almost never see any cis leftist say. Regardless of who's sucking his dick, a tanky's a tanky. To that, Stalin worked hard to cultivate his cult of personality, surviving him 70 years after he bought the farm. For one, his nickname, not birth-given, literally means Man of Steel, evoking Superman in 1912 as already being fascist on the western side of things before Siegel and Schuster birthed Superman Clark Kent and his farm in 1938. They're doing so, arguably to ramp up the American war effort, similar to Captain America. A blood ties, race science, vampirism and eugenics, mad science, etc., is copied by Eastern powers, haunted by treacherous nobles, and feted to fated czars, i.e. defenders, but also diplomatic representatives of predatory feeders tied to state trauma, but also unequal power, shape-shifting and dark desire, the demon side of the die, through cults of personality generally found around the world. Out of the ancient and medieval pasts, dying empires come fearsomely back to life, i.e. vampires are charming and educated. Having access to power is something they symbolize as statuesque, suitably imposing funerary symbols of sex, strength, and knowledge, etc., as power. Statues, be they vanity project effigies or otherwise, are historically things to can't pull down, or portraits commissioned by the usual commissaries below. Regarding the creators of Superman, as Jewish American immigrants camping blood libel, but also banking on it, only to have their characters stolen out from under them by the American media conglomerate. Source Kylie Mars, How the Creators of Superman Were Screwed Out of Millions of Dollars, 2017. No honor among thieves. Exhibit 2. Different exhibits from Stalin's kayfabe, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and raising awareness. Left to middle artist. Top far left, Louis Chu Ha. Top middle left, Jacques Louis David. Bottom left, Chen Yanning. Top right, Bungie. Bottom right, William Blake. City or nation, state revolutionaries and their poppy red sanguine historically decay into tyranny. From Caesar to Vlad Dracul, the dragon a symbol of status, sex, and power, to Napoleon to George Washington to Mao, both in and out of fiction, with purely fictional additions, e.g. Shakespeare's historical play and its famous line, Et tu Brute, actually gigantic vampire hauntologies that bear a non-fictional stamp, e.g. Balor the Leveler and his own dragon's red cape of power, top right, built on top of stories of stories of stories, i.e. the narrative of the crypt, i.e. from Hogel's The Restless Labyrinth, Cryptonymy in the Gothic novel, 1980. However cryptomimetic these seem, they nonetheless bear a kernel of truth, as all vampires do. Dictators suck, and must be anachronistically slain alongside their myths and statescraft. Right, top right and bottom, Matt Whitaker's What Was the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, 2023, and Stephen Cole's U.S. Surpasses All the Genocidal Records. Poster and fact sheet, 2016, cited Symposium Aftercare, What is the Gothic? Men are states, corporations, and empires in disguise, small, decaying accordingly and refusing to die, despite them and theirs being reduced to unthinking zombies, thralls, and vampires' masters, who can't digest what they eat, the decay of mastery above. They become more and more like corpses, thus more and more blind to the harm they cause, but also charming in their ship of Theseus, or George Washington's axe, desperation, i.e. something too abject, by us, back in their faces. Fire of the gods belong to the gods, meaning both those playing at gods, are a fire of unknown origin for making demons, 2025, and of the natural world is alien to them and vice versa, what I call mirror syndrome. Source, thumbnail, Warnox, I am terrified of Titan, 2025. To this, vampires are paradoxically stealth hunters, yes, but also bullseye red targets for whatever they're drawing attention to, are a cryptonymy and abjection, which again we'll get to. It's very bull in a china shop, a given Sino-Soviet split, or something comparable, e.g. Stalin and his tenuous friendship with America, speaking to various nation prestige under new management, that affords the usual displaced critiques foisted off onto the stars and outer space, from Star Wars to Superman, 1977 and 1978, speaking to the usual abject capital and small power trips for boys we've been alluding to, e.g. Titan from Megamind, above 2010, and Homelander from The Boys, below 2019, both cases aping zoos, reflecting the patriarchy's worst habits into the present space and time, i.e. incels, MGTOW, and fascism chasing Rome through killer babies horribly entitled but mentally weak, like slashers turning Rome inside out, with Medusa holding the mirror. They speak to Superman's classic, "It's a bird, it's a plane," pickup note, his vampiric super strength, speed, and power of flight, and telltale red cape fatal vision, while being notably allergic to non-toxic love and yellow sunlight. A superior-minded, weak-strong infiltrator who secretly thinks people, according to Quentin Tarantino, a rape apologist, are categorically feeble. The bigger they are, the harder they fall, bubbles waiting to be popped by those holding the needle. And yet, Superman was always a cop, thus prone to abjection, exposing the state's fears of death is built into it, a mortal man doomed to die. This includes more recent kayfabe, out from ancient forms, i.e. making similar sympathy for the devil arguments in alien ways, e.g. Thragg from Invincible further down, 2021. Specifically the show, not the comic, making its own kneel before Zod Tyrant's plea, is back from the Phantom Zone, at a given Fortress of Solitude, Castle Grayskull, etc. From Milton's own comics-grade silliness, Ari Hallucina's The Accidental Satanist, 2014. Think Superman with a mustache and pouting like James Gunn, and David Harbour's rendition of the creature chasing the bride in Creature Commandos, dressed in red below, cited concerning Venezuela and state vampirism, 2026. A warrior king dating back to Alexander the Great, but no homo, focusing on biological reproduction to regenerate a prior dying empire, and one Alexander famously left his generals, not his non-existent children or slave prostitute boys. The refrain Jesus wept, translating well enough to Alexander wept, or he's scouting the field, footnote 12, i.e. during the same old cartographic refrains, geography isn't destiny any more than blood is. See A Note on Canonical Essentialism, 2024. You mean Space Hitler or Octavian avenging Caesar? Don't get me wrong, the performance is fine. It reminds me of the voice actor for the 70s, Rankin Bass, Smaug, and Spots, but he's a Nazi. Let's not forget, okay? Edit. He's also Dracula, Mario, but I digress. Sympathy for the devil is a core Gothic idea, but it's dangerous to see Thragg as the most human, i.e., the great man theory. I would argue he's conflicted, but his humanity stays in conflict with his being a space Nazi. But, and here's where things complicate, he's also Stalin. Fascists and communists share the same kayfabe space, and Thragg echoes some socialist ideas as much as the betrayer, a mad scientist, echoes fascist ones, specifically eco-fascism, or the humans are the virus to exterminate trope. Nothing is discrete, which is how the Dracula character historically works, a vice character inviting troubling comparison from the audience. Source, YouTube community post, Persephone Vanderward, 4/27/2026, in response to Constantine James Thragg, the most human Viltrumite, 2026. Note, you're huge, so you must have huge guts. To that, I've expanded my dissection of Thragg a bit here to get up in his guts and parse their significance. Uri, the Caesarean numinous alluded to earlier, one where I, the trans woman medievalist, taken from her mother's womb, untimely ripped, my brother and I delivered via C-section, just like Caesar, and basically gave Macduff, sticking it to Macbeth, Leon Macduff, and damned be he, or any pronoun, who cries hold enough. Perse, 5/3/2026. However great he appears, Thragg is Lord of the Dead, a corpse under the skin, above. The state has signed him a bad check when he cannot cash. To compensate such situations, and men resort to unchecked bloodletting, to calling the herd, but openly and in secret. Like Peter Pan stealing children, or brides, child soldiers in this case, he's a fairy king whose own magic is fading, in which he and his lost boys replenish by bathing in the blood of virgins, echoes of the Skeksis, Uri, the Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, Appetites, 2019, or they're taken by guile or force, rape is rape, and their wishes don't come true. It's not long before his men mutiny and target themselves, nigh everyone expendable while Thragg consorts with his de facto father's skull like Hamlet to Yorick. I knew him, Horatio, except he's more dependent on such artifacts than even the Prince of Denmark, his own father's ghost, an endless source of unresolved daddy issues, an absentee mother, and non-stop misery. A story famously paranoid and fixated on the simulacrum of revenge, killing everyone by the fifth act. The readiness is all. The dangerous thing about him, as a dictator, is he thinks he's smart, and he's cornered and desperate. Fetal hubris, the stuff of Greek heroes, and Dark Souls games, e.g. Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, and that game's 2009 Lonely and Miserable Dracula, for his debatable son to stake Plin Plin Plon, echoed by Shakespearean warrior nerds, and later still American offshoots of the same Caesarean numinous, and its Freudian invasively witchly theft, e.g. with scissors, as the changeling baby snatcher from Inside 2007 does, while aping the Manson girls doing Shannon Tate in, the late wife of pedophile Roman Polanski, who recreated her murder in his 1971 Macbeth adaptation, a movie both X-rated and funded by Playboy magazine, no less. A maverick general without a leader to tell him what to do, similar to Soulblighter in the Myth franchise, or Octavian in real life, a steerless de facto executive gone rogue, a volcano waiting to erupt, a bride without a head, a wolf without a foot, etc. So is Thragg deeply unstable, dishonest to others and himself, self-destructive, and ultimately cannibalistic beneath the surface of strength, facade of communal values, just like fascism or capital in decays, which decays by design, Darvel and obscurantism. In keeping with Hamlet, Thragg's completely bonkers, meaning he talks to himself a good part of the time while ignoring his friend's sagely counsel, the Emperor's therapy skull, something of a meme, a magic 8-ball above, i.e., while seeing ghosts he cannot distinguish from living people. Indeed, some of those are traitors, i.e. dead men walking for him to better senseless and drink the blood of unwillingly. But Thragg himself, for all his might, is also just a corpse, a mighty one killing for company that doesn't know it is dead, trying to cheat death, i.e. deaf to interventions from his former friends, and hallucinating badly relegates to a given land he makes into his black pyramid, until the protagonist throws him into the sun, Icarus style. His life is joyless, an unhappy wraith who walks the earth and the stars in the afterlife bereft of warmth. The sun killing him, symbolic of the vampire's curse finally coming to an end, and poetically by his rival biting him on the throat like common prey. Whatever value he once had is long gone, eclipsed by he and his dwindling men having dug their own graves, chasing greatness, echoing Peter S. Beagle's Discount Robin Hood, Captain Cully, and his band of free men. Men cannot eat gold any more than dragons can, and skull equals theft. Pirate flag or not, an enchantment Thragg has obviously fallen under, prey to, similar to Hamlet chasing Daddy to destroy everyone in sight. A council of witches uprooted by witch hunters, a problem all on its own, but I digress. The latter plunged the former into the sun. Its purification by fire, any greatness Thragg once possessed, eclipsed by his own gargantuan stupidity. There is no trap so deadly as the one you set for yourself. Too little, too late, my friend. He takes his father's place, trying to be king so hard it kills him, buried alive like any other criminal the state chews up and spits out. I can add colors to the chameleon, change shapes with Proteus for advantages, and set the murderous Machiavel to school. I can do this and cannot get a crown? Tut. If it were farther off, I'll pluck it down. Source Richard III, circa 1592. Sure, Dan. Cited, Introducing Revolutionary Cryptonymy and the State's Medieval Monopolies on Violence and Terror, 2024. Corpses chained to corpses. In Gothic, such things are endless, per Aguirre's infernal concentric pattern. A hall to die in, and men to bury me. Glory is a myth, escape and resistance futile. Ari from Escaping Jadis, Exhibit 39C2. Artist left and right, Bernie Wrightson. In Frankenstein, the story is a murder-suicide, enacted by the zombie son shambling towards the father and mother, in an act of childhood revenge the double parent first dreams about before sculpting his child, or a Zeus pulling Metis from his forehead. Alucard, by comparison, does not want to kill his father Dracula, who had sex with Alucard's mom to have a by and large natural birth, tainted by bunk libel and pre-fascist coding. But the reckoning felt during the fatal return to his childhood home, something he does repeatedly throughout the franchise, is always traumatic to Alucard. It's also, as we shall see, dangerous sometimes. The house wins. Its recursive motion, something I've explored, per the Gothic chronotope, The Black Castle, extensively on the backs of older authors, Ari the Monomyth and Cycle of Kings, or Perceptive Zombie Eyeballs Paralyzing Zombie Tyrants, with reverse objection, 2025. E.g. Paul Martin for my master's thesis, Lost in Necropolis, 2018. Martin writes, we encounter this kind of recursive movement throughout the game, and these movements are executed alongside the recursions of the game's plot. The path in the labyrinth leads Theseus, regardless of its windings and regardless of the direction in which he is moving at a given time, always towards its center. Similarly, Alucard's journey, both physical and psychological, is always ultimately pointed towards the destruction of Dracula and the rejection of his overtures, i.e., Aguirre's infernal concentric pattern. Source, Ambivalence and Recursion in Castlevania Symphony of the Night, 2011. I respond, for Alucard, Dracula is the end goal. However, unlike Simon, Alucard's arc of motion is influenced by items he discovers inside the space. This includes warp devices and magical forms, i.e., the former allows Alucard to teleport back and forth in either direction, not simply forward, as seen in Super Mario Bros. 1985. The latter includes the wolf, the bat, and mist, each able to move and attack. Alucard rivals Samus in terms of pure mobility, and Simon in terms of combat prowess, yet the most impressive part is the space itself, which cannot be traversed without upgrading motion. Source, Lost in Necropolis. Figure 5 Castle Map from Toru Hagihara and Koji Igarashi's Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Sony PlayStation, 1997. Commenting as I do on the Dark Fairy Sodomy Castle, giving the player unusual spaces, i.e. the liminal ontology of war, dangerous go to repeatedly reify, then move through, a simulation of pandemonium to rule inside through magical assembly, and other poetic devices I coined below. All foster a routine wisdom of the ancients and the ancestors as coming up from hell, an ambiguous inkblot danger tied to larger systemic problems also below, i.e. from a song written in decay, 2024. Artist Jocelyn Carmaz. In turn, we can do one of the Gothic specialities, one might say the oldest trick in the book, using the dialectic of the alien to pull down the sick, harmful barriers and install fresh, healthy ones. The bear skeleton left, quintessentially symbolic of the medieval Grim Reaper during the Black Death, that make us selectively absorbative and able to contain and process trauma to source, contain, and heal from, i.e., a deliberate confusion, a blending of the senses that frees them to see more clearly than capitalism wants. The eye of man hath not heard, the ear of man hath not seen, man's hand is not able to taste, e.g. the eye-opening power of monstrous sex that per Shakespeare's slutty fairies is wholly drug-like and BDSM infused. This boundary selection is not only useful for challenging the state's boundaries for me, not for the mantra, during selective collective punishment through the denial of shelter and other basic human rights, but it happens through another Gothic staple, the scary room of death, Black Veil, but also the homunculus, i.e. the castle of something giant we live inside, and whose giant's belly of the beast is concentric in both directions, anisotropic and phenomenological, analogous to an organism during liminal expression, full of bright, spinning alarms, choking smoke, and encroaching darkness, collectively symbolizing systemic distress as discreetly organic or inorganic, and more a combination of the two. The result is reality being thrown into question, what normally seems solid suddenly feeling gaseous and unable to support our weight. It can be quite exhilarating to suddenly feel one's boundaries disintegrate, to cleave through them like fog, but if taken too far can also make us feel unmoored, adrift and disempowered, floating in the purgatorial void as something with which to tumble through until we die, if we die. The basic idea is addressing state-sanctioned impotency, menticide, to fight madness with madness, calculated risk, so if the state's disorienting conditions offend us and make us feel out of control, then our target addressal of their vacuum grants us fluency of their essence of gravity. Swimming natively through space as the natural ground state for our kind, thus treated as monstrous feminine by the state, we can grow accustomed to its strange conditions, thus empowered, i.e. Edward Said's Pleasures of Exile, one's home as foreign, a place to restore while existing in limbo, perdition, purgatory, and similar such Dante-esque states of existence. Getting our space legs, we can focus on the enrichment of our dark forces that then heal our imperiled world with, while we have to acknowledge it first as such, through fatal vision, below, hell-bent for leather. In turn, our flesh infusions are collective, thus able to address systemic problems, provided intersectional solidarity is achieved on an intuitive second-nature level, from praxial synthesis to catharsis. A new baseline per Gothic communism is a historical material fact once achieved. This happens through targeting children as more sponge-like and playful, but also by showing teenagers and adults that it's not just okay to play with Gothic themes during Little Gothic BDSM to gain some feel for medieval intuition. It's absolutely essential. A torture castle of doom is, oddly enough, the base place to foster empathy, because that is where we can express chattelization, alienation, and similar abuses in ways that can actually harm us. Emphasis me. The pearly castles are the worst. Per the Gothic, it's a buffer and a passage, a valve to open and close in memento mori, oft funerary language. Such calculated risks aren't for the dead, but those who survive as needing to acclimate to mortality as soon as possible by hijacking medical language as torturous, thus more able to understand what's at stake. Such subversion becomes, oddly enough, a way of life, a language to speak easily to and naturally with post-acquisition, to become one with the world, as a Gothic chronotype still occupied by nature as bird-like in ways indigenous cultures still speak of, e.g. birds, Bay explains, are very important to Tikala Marli, including the Tui's song, warning of danger and of war, to, as I put it, call the warriors home and to battle against our foes. Through art and the useful myth of Gothic ancestry as a counter-terrorist device, such things are personified through art to make us better stewards of nature, i.e. by identifying with it as routinely hunted and harvested to extinction by capital, treating all as alien fetish prey they may reap until such beauties vanish from the face of the earth. Artist Amber Harris. The point isn't to despair at Hal's arrival déjà vu, but to use its powers to equip workers, unpaid or otherwise, with whatever's needed to dodge state predation and avoid assimilation, which is poor stewardship. The joy is partly the point, but also the emancipatory power it dialectically materially offers beyond the space of play, a training grounds eventually taken to the streets. Rebellion is concentric, retro-future, escaping into hell afterwards. Bring Promethean treasures back to the mainland, i.e. that sack Rome, the pastoral lie, to have the whore's revenge on monomythic structures. A post-scarcity world founded, at least partially, on pre-capitalist indigenous ideas and preferential code, but also the cryptomimesis of sex, drugs, and rock and roll that Gothic showcases year-round, e.g. Metallica's Disposable Heroes, 1986, the year of my birth. Life planned out before my birth, nothing could I say. Had no chance to see myself, molded day by day. It goes on and on, me set up by because capital and state predation, a retro-future enterprise, go chronotopically on and on, always another castle and monster inside, aristocrats or otherwise. This has all happened before, and we're laughing at bourgeois resurrections of old dead, stupid people, often kings below. The idea has become the institution. Time to move on, to quote Top Dollar from The Crow, 1994, RE ruling the slum. So often, the dead are skins to wear until capital lets you inside the house, with Metallica selling out to monopolize metal for decades, in which Promethean stories comment on a house as well and truly doomed. Exhibit 1A, 1A, 1C1 from Thesis Argument, Capitalism Sexualizes Everything, 2023. The tradition of all dead generations weighs like a nightmare in the brains of the living, the 18th Brumaire. To this, the oral traditions of the stage play can be especially medieval, thus plastic and vivid. Macbeth's fatal vision isn't just a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the heat-oppressed brain, Macbeth, but a copy of a copy of a copy, an endless nightmare loop, a simulacrum. The yawning hall of kingly mirrors shadows him as shown guilt and revenge of a smiling past that somehow is all around him, having already won. I digress. Studying the bones of the dead includes the kingly dead in their liminal boneyards. Such things communicate through coming-on recursive doom, meaning from Macbeth to Doomguy to Thragg, as Roman fools meandering then speedrunning towards demise, and Caesar's numinous shadow, rabid with bloodlust. So do characters like Alucard or Thragg, the tragic prince himself, and son of Lord Dracula. Just like the historical Vlad was, cannot escape such places, or their false bloodlines. They really can't, for they are trapped in them like rats in a maze, or the Minotaur in the middle, different animal, same predator, prey, plight. I'm in danger versus I am the danger. Such places cryptonymically suck, per Marx, though he was speaking to capital and the bourgeoisie, which neo-Gothic castles secretly symbolize, and suck endlessly and royally the blood of those who either live there, or try in perpetual futility to reverse aging and restore a circular ruin. Eat your heart out, Borges. i.e., to its former imaginary greatness, a copy of a forgery that eats the forger alive. Sound and fury, babes. Which is why I repeatedly say how salvation comes from within. Holistic study, a refrain stressing that very fact. Pound that drum until the cows come home, which activism essentially is, disguised or not. Regarding son of Lord Dracula, Alucard also being a half-breed monster demigod, similar to Hercules, Achilles, Merlin, etc., out of the pagan religions into the Abrahamic ones, as forever insecure, unwelcome, and indebted to the past while standing in daddy's shadow and having Oedipal mommy issues or chasing the virgin whore, but I digress. He's also like Thragg, queer-coded, insofar as his blood is cursed, and any attempt to reproduce is doomed by endless penance, accident of birth. Thragg is more the ancient Spartan kind of gay man, with Catholic Christ on the cross notes, whereas Alucard and similar tortured Japanese heroes above, artist Ayame Kojima, cited left and right, Nancy Drew syndrome, and X marks the spot, 2025. See also Castlevania Season 3, 2020. Are more like fash-coated twinks, twink death echoing Dennis Cooper, but the twink hitting back against state enemies, i.e. homonormativity, caging and killing the whore, succubae or otherwise, and their young Frankenstein grade 1974 knockers above. Indeed, and to practice what I preach, I do so here, are a conflict, mothers in conflict and liberation. Source, Horror Paradise Black Phantom. A paradigm shift requires a change of perspective, ruffling feathers Said style, but also a structuring of optics, of triggering factors, of outcomes that feel doomed, of which a part of us never sees coming. Families are always falling and rising in America. We can prevent that, but have to change the system by seeing its grave danger, mirror syndrome, for what it is, i.e. by who it views and treats as monstrous feminine, the wild and the feisty, but also the innocent. But we can't afford to be innocent either, to be willfully naive about the reality that all work is sexualized and alien, thus demanding patronage from privileged peoples to move forward to happier days. In turn, capital will be exposed as a prison, its sick home as an unironic torture dungeon filled with patriarchal jailers and tokenized fiends. To transition away from that to post-scarcity requires reflection on the present world with pre-capitalist nostalgia and updated non-fatal forms. Medusa as friendly to the cause. It requires seeing the false harmful qualities and idealized things, to tell them that we don't want their protection, but to be left alone, i.e. as a collective, monstrous feminine working against state predation, inviting all workers to grow and develop in harmony with nature, not unironically alien and fetishized, but part of the same complex interaction made ironic. Thanks to Enlightenment thinking's modern interference, our traumatic past becomes involved, but through Gothic reflection and reinvention, it lets us become the thing that never quite existed, as xenomorphic, biomechanical, existed by recent technology and pre-capitalist forms whose combined thinking achieves post-scarcity through natural resources and morphological freedom of expression. It is not post-human, as far as our basic human rights are attained and humanity reclaimed from a thoroughly Western idea sickened by Enlightenment thinking and Cartesian domination. It's merely the conclusion of the Riddler reclaimed by us, to make our own monstrous feminine arrangements of something akin to a caterpillar and wasp that leads to future metamorphoses as healthy regardless of what emerges from the chrysalid. We don't need a paternal protector at all then, but merely to be left alone by colonizers acting in bad faith through shared poetic devices, but convincing their enforcers to cease their attack, thereby surrendering their hold and their power on Medusa, requires humanizing us through the very things the state lies to us with. It requires steady demands, but also the will to fight back inside the realms of imagination and reality as intertwined, i.e. through courage and wit, cunning and perspective, the ability to blend in and play with illusions natural and material. It takes a wizard to beat a wizard, but we are all of us wizards, kings, queens, gods, and devils, with the power to unite inside capital, to escape it by transforming it, thus ourselves, into a better world over time. Emphasis me. It is like Ovid's Metamorphosis, circa 8 CE, a magical make-believe to bring the impossible could-be into existence, from an egg, a caterpillar, and from there a beautiful butterfly, or is it a wasp inside the caterpillar to emerge from the same container, a sleek, sexy destroyer? Does it represent our revolutionary potential to win, as the Punic invader does, through splendid Mendak's deception, or is it double of that, exposing Troy as false and we, like Medusa, wrongfully accused? Does it portend to our unmaking through inaction by capital devouring us from within, or we turning the tables to avoid such a fate when Medusa eats us? Why not both? Poetry is a battlefield. Source. And here, drink up from Meeting Rebels, 2024. Capitalism must be escaped from within, but also with the help of those who inspire us at different points. Mythically like Ariadne's thread, except we're not escaping the labyrinth and killing the Minotaur. We're teaching it to be our friend and make the labyrinth our home. At different points in the process, as cryptonyms, monsters speak to obvious trauma as obscured by things that point, yet also conceal it, the forbidden surreal knowledge hidden between language, inside the gray area, as something to track down in obvious forms we don't want to escape at all, but lose ourselves inside to find a hidden truth contained between the narrative, the castles, the obvious fakes, obviously speaking to obvious problems as concealed badly by capital and concealed by us from capital to survive while critiquing it. i.e. Cryptonymy and Camp, R.A. Geiger's Gothic surrealism, the xenomorph, more on that later. It's often right in front of us, staring us in the face, or written all over our face, as our face. To face. Monsters are everywhere, denoting a wider problem concealed by its own data, commercialized. As always, the Gothic is rife with massive but useful paradoxes, or Gothic castles and those who embody them. Feudal knowledge isn't a detriment or a deterrent then, but happily sought out for fun as a means of rapturous and creative solutions built on older attempts. Escape for workers isn't to bury our heads in the sand then, but enter authored sites of paradox, dens of confusion, the infernal concentric pattern, to play with Cryptonymy as deliberately leading to a healing of the home is sick with capitalism and its built-in predation, demonizing nature, and psychosexual ways fetishizing rape and death of would-be contenders while in the same larger belly of the beast, so to speak, below. Heavy lies the crown in any event, and I've written about the campy power of Satan in anarchist hands, power as paradox to perform, or notes on power. However, calling Thragg the most human Viltrumite, unironically, is a bit like calling Hitler the most human Nazi, or Hercules abjectly punching death through not-so-cowardly lions, the Nemean lion above. Punching death is a very old idea, with great man theory, as far as modernity cares, under state crisis, dating back to populist draining conquerors like Napoleon Bonaparte, or Shelley's Frankenstein camping the ogre, a famous propagandist, alluding to older creation myths. Fascism would play out a century or so down the road, depending on the novel's edition, i.e. threatening the status quo while simultaneously progressing towards a vengeful past, meaning the very Promethean quest and Ozymandian dilemma Shelley outlined with her own ambiguous, though ultimately far more sympathetic, man-made Superman, the creature. Artist Bernie Wrightson, source, Wrightson's Frankenstein at 40, 2023, cited Making Demons. Said creation offered a troubling reflection of the Cartesian man of reason's flawed self-image. A dark master slave, double capable of the very mortal gladiatorial violence its nobler chicken shit half represses, treating the other wrestlers less like flesh and more like claymation, e.g. Celebrity Deathmatch, 1998. Rip and tear until it is done, indeed. Such hyperbolic bloodletting, echoing the feral lycanthrope phase of the Saiyan's wounded pride, destroyed homeworld, planet Vegeta. Ari Dragon Ball Super Broly, 2019, is at Gothic, speaking to a similar palingenetic ultranationalism from space. Except it's never done. Each murder won in a long hit list before the killer's own demise by their own hand. The human condition here, something of a gladiatorial train wreck, an impactful spectacle to revel in the self-fulfilling suffering of others. This happens per cautionary tale, or spoofs, e.g. Killer Clowns from Outer Space, 1988, a delightfully campy story that sees the small-town sheriff squaring off against the clowns, space aliens less disguised as clowns, and more who actually look like clowns, who then cocoon humans in cotton candy, or something that resembles it, before sucking out their blood in spidery fashion, spoofing Stephen King's It, 1986, for good measure. Punishing treason, in Thragg's case, in Hammurabi style, eye for an eye ways, meaning those that regrettably blind the blinder, is suitably homosocial and Oedipal. Here lies dumbass the dumb, echoing Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, face-fucking himself and his family members to death, only a matter of time before others do to him what he did to them and theirs, repaying the favor by castrating him, beheading or otherwise, before the lion sleeps tonight in the mighty jungle's jaws. Laws, thereof, the harder he struggles, the more enmeshed he becomes, might makes right, and death before dishonor. Pride comes before the fall. Thragg, the strongman, overestimates himself and his mythical strength, slips and falls in gross humiliation, drinking more than his fill, mid-blood spill, his hydrophobic lust for battle doing him in by overtaking his wits mid-trolley problem. So a king has his reign and then he dies. Thragg, a giant baby, throwing a tantrum while losing at chess with death, clawing back ineptly at the last word, having outrun him and his deceptively aging imprimatur, where death in medieval thought is the leveler of kings and peasants alike, there's always someone bigger than you, and death always wins, divine right and its entitlement be damned, e.g. the Seventh Seal, and similar stories in and out of fiction, Ari from the Eyeball Zone. Exhibit 34, A1, A3, A1D. Various fun photos and remembrances, some of my favorite or available foods, a photo when Zool and I ate out after first becoming an item, the aforementioned table and chair from Wellington, and of course Sisyphus the slug making his nightly journey across Todd's floor. But specifically I'm referring to this image, an allusion to the seventh seal while I was at Manchester, England, in Manchester, England at MMU. Your move, pal. You think I haven't got this covered? You've got another thing coming. Just bring it. Good luck in your epic battle with the exams. I never got this. I guess this person is the counselor and death is the students, which I guess kind of makes sense, little gothicists. But shouldn't it be the other way around? I don't know. Cite whatever you need to do the trick, including your enemy's numerous fatal errors to revive Medusa, she's alive, and trying to stay relevant, Thragg only cements himself as hopelessly vain and blind, both colossal blood-sucking twat and irritable and crabby manchild who the gods or Medusa step on, Prometheus style. Only a man, and a dumb animal one at that, who makes other animals, as intelligent as they need to be in order to survive, look positively genius in the bargain. He fucks his own ass, not meaning to while his legacy, what was promised to him, and he feels owed, and shitifies before his very eyes, which cannot see what is happening to him, nor notice the sweet taste of victory turn to ashes in his mouth. And so we point and laugh as Medusa steps on Nazi Batman, or Superman, whatever, staking himself silly, the ignominious death leveling the proud to his chagrin and our delight. What a dum-dum! Laugh at the gods of a fascist sort, for they are false, and all deities reside within our breast, loves. Use what keeps them up at night to make their worst nightmares, and our dreamlike universal liberation from homeless, Camelot or otherwise, come gloriously true. Regarding the fucking of one's own ass, and if that sounds vulgar and crude, which the Gothic is, prone to bad puns while playing with taboos, consider how impalement generally involved inserting the pike into someone's ass before ramming it up to their bodies and out their mouth. Source 29. The real Dracula did not suck people's blood. He shoved sharp poles up their rears. From Khalid al-Hassan's Horrific Facts from History That Will Invade Nightmares, 2021. A new dark age, indeed. I think I'll take crucifixion or live burial. Source Nathan Graysom's Filing, a game in which he plays as the Monty Python Foot, 2014. And with all of that said and done, for now, consider our extended dissection of His Majesty's flying corpse or circus above closed. Roll credits to March of the Gladiators. Such tyrants' ignoble battles of the gods echo older oral stories, e.g. Zeus and Mount Olympus, the tyrants, etc., but also modern written fascism giving empire and capital state predation a human facelift once more. Blood, hair, sweat, grown for the cyborgs by state corporations, i.e. trading in flesh, both chattelized and verminized for their aims, often infiltration, re. The Terminator, 1984, and healing from rape. Crisis, a facet of state production and capital, yields dark desires for perceived outsiders, i.e. to fit in and be strong enough to avoid future harm. Triangulating in-group members and out-group tokens to punch down all the harder and keeping power where it is all the while. So was the cause for Stalin, Superman and Thragg, from older state models, already straddling feudalism out of Rome, re. as refusing to die, including their myths, e.g. Vlad the Impaler and his ironic stash, and patronymic below. Supermen reflect royalty as eating more than their lessers, the lion's share cannibalizing the elderly and the young by stubborn to a fault, entirely paranoid pack leaders who, eating too much, eventually succumb to an internal might makes right revolt, skinning the apex predator alive. Echoes of divine right, Supermen equal their own spectre of Caesar versus the Gorgon's communist one, and numinous or to psych in either case, not once upon a time, but for all eternity as hyper-real, a simulacrum of power as perpetual false copy, as states from Sparta to Athens to America are built in slavery and always lie, cryptonymically, through false flags feeding in bad faith, to preserve themselves for as long as humanly possible, or letting Stalin die from a stroke because his own guards were famously too scared to check in on him, or perhaps had him assassinated. Source: Jackie Mansky's The True Story of the Death of Stalin, 2017. Exhibit 0A1B1 from On Giving Birth, a painting of Vlad III, Prince of Wallachia, 1431-1476, also known by his patronymic name Dracula, patronymic meaning a name based on that of a male ancestor, and posthumously dubbed Vlad the Impaler due to his brutality, the name of the vampire Count Dracula in Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, 1897, was inspired by Vlad's patronymic. Source: British Library. In short, Pygmalion casts a long shadow, and one we use to break capitalist realism during the same larger-than-life language. Blind to their actual reflections, we iconoclasts, whores or otherwise, reverse what they refuse to normally behold, doing so on the aegis and its infernal concentric pattern, re perceptors on the eyeballs. Vampires equal canvases that enjoy or revile, from garlic to silver to kryptonite, a variety of poetic qualities, including taboos made objection, e.g. homophobia and anti-Semitism, and the patriarchal homosocial nature of such beings, but really any objection the ruling class can file and pro-labor defenders of nature counter mid-progression, making for a close shave, as it were. Yes, they're undead, demonic, and deeply animal, often creatures of the night, e.g. wolves, rats, and bats, but also planetary in their former might as doomed, i.e. laid out on unavoidable paths whose terrible circuitry turn ultimately inwards to collide with hard, earth-shattering realities. The death, again, always wins. Exhibit 40G1 further down. There's nothing new under the sun or moon, but the sun weakens like Superman, like it does any vampire, him having a weak strong side like any Nazi, and a dark side like any tidal-locked orbit. These Supermen and women are often of steel, unfeeling and weapon-like, but also flesh-and-blood gargoyles, Peter Pan's shepherds calling the herd, while trapped mythically and biomechanically between duty and desire, i.e. as things to witness, the manicidal, traveling barbarian, coming home to roost, whether theirs or not, the usual ghost of the counterfeit speaking to middle-class fears of faulty inheritance and alien invasion, the soft yet strong parodied imperfectly by Tarantino and Rodriguez in the 90s, but also Kevin Smith and similar weird canonical nerds that iconoclastic ones challenged therein, or a gun to some extent. Gargoyles and menticidal being terms I unpack in The Nation-State and Monster Modes, Totalitarianism and Opposing Forces, 2023, respectively. Exhibit 45C2B1 from Whores and Faust, Summoning the Whore, Black Penitent, 2025. Older feminists, swerfs, tend to knock the topos of power of women, but it's something that neo-medieval argument can broach from a variety of sources, e.g. Smith's anglicizing of the formerly demonic Selma Hayek above from an exotified other wrought with vampire tropes punching down at Mexico from America and attacking sex workers, i.e. with Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez's From Dusk Till Dawn, 1996, presenting the vampires as blood-sucking fodder, the bar full of combat vets, bikers, and runaway criminals must kill to survive. R.E. Black penitents being one-upped by older, more experienced black penitents, but also the assimilative myth for Rodriguez of a savage Mexico, a bad bloodline threatening a white American hostage virgin, and who Clooney's suitably gruff, swarth, and sexy anti-hero must protect from out-and-out horror, which is what a neo-Gothic demon out from the medieval past ultimately is, an illegitimate claim to power through sex and force. In his own words, Clooney's a bastard, not a fucking bastard. Psychos don't explode when sunlight hits them. I don't care how crazy they are, though I presume Thragg just melts or burns to a crisp. A vampire's a vampire, but the state variety are specifically cops that further objection during endless war, thus predation. Cops lie because states lie, i.e. raping by design in ways that share the stage with communists, the latter whose critical function, poetic devices, must travel beyond mere aesthetics of a so-called nominal or siege communism being something the Soviets were guilty of when it came to their victims being thrown without mercy and to gulags by false friends, meaning alongside American German concentration camps, and all to prohibit consolidate power around a given executive and their armies of bootlicking yes-men, but also Ozymandian devils Mason and Bime below. To that, we don't want to give rise to witch hunts that harm workers and heroes of the working class, but to eat the rich and powerful by showing the empire's nude mortality the light of day, and state citizens drunk on such things, i.e. redistributing power to a more horizontal plane, as whores do, by killing our darlings, however super they once were, or tell themselves, and currently have fallen under Randian acrobatics, meaning of the Brad Bird, but also Bioshock Big Daddy sort, echoed tragically on bodybuilders like Mike Menser, uncritically lapping Atlas Shrugged Up 4 years after Stalin died, 1957, first overpower them, then show them their own mortality in cosmic level dupe status, the useful idiot Roman fool, R.E. Macbeth, ultimately expendable and left holding the bag for the state, for whose ruling class sups on figureheads, doubling as momentary spearheads, their time in the sun becoming too close to keep them afloat. Regarding Brad Bird, see Renegade Cuts, The Incredibles, and Rand and Objectivism, 2018, which highlights how Randian Supermen were corporate bureaucrats not dissimilar from Stalin or American executives, men often accented by outrageous facial hair, not just Stalin and Hitler's mustaches, but Andrew Ryan's from OG Bioshock, and entitled Underwhelming and Tragically Stupid Superman. A man chooses, a slave obeys. Model Rick Valente. From Polymetheus to Balor to Stalin to Thragg, and many others besides, giants have weak points, and dragons and or vampires, etc., but I digress. To that, patriarchy and capital weaken men, those acting like men, meaning as receivers of universal privilege under capital's modules of class, culture, and race, i.e. fragility as white, straight, and male, and something to show castrate them with on the aegis, so less Ayn Rand, and more Plato Aristocles, or the Gorgon, her world-sized ass, making Atlas shrug by sitting on him above. Uri from Canonical Discrimination in Video Games, 2025. From Polyphemus to Balor to Stalin to Thragg, and many others besides, giants have weak spots to denude and thrust into, and dragons and or vampires, etc., but I digress. To that, patriarchy and capital weaken men, and those acting like men blaming the woman. E.g., mixed Irish vaudeville from the Rocky movies saying this sexist gem, women weaken legs, meaning as receivers of universal privilege under capital's modules of class, culture, and race, i.e. fragility as white, straight, and male, is something to show castrate them with on the aegis, so less Ayn Rand, and more Plato Aristocles, or Socrates, but watch out for Hemlock, or the Gorgon, her world-sized ass making Atlas shrug by sitting on him above. Uri from Canonical Discrimination in Video Games, 2025. Think Zeus pulling Metis from his forehead, the patriarchal seat of reason the Renaissance thinkers supposedly channeled when rebirthing civilization, except that concept doesn't really spring from nowhere, and in fact was codified during the Enlightenment. Plato wasn't just the tutor of Aristotle and a founding father of Western philosophy. He was a conspicuously muscular man whose immortal name harkens to his halcyon days as a young, strapping wrestler. Plato was a fighter. This is not a metaphor. The historian Diogenes Laertius tells us that Platon, meaning broad shoulders, was the philosopher's wrestling nickname. As a prominent aristocrat, Plato was known for his pedigree and youthful poetry, but also for his physique, the muscles of a gifted grappler who reportedly competed at the Isthmian Games. And for all his wariness of the body and its wayward desires, Plato also recommended wrestling for the youth. In his dialogue Laws, he celebrated the benefits of stand-up grappling. This had a straightforward military use, developing strength and health for the battlefield, but also cultivated character if practiced with a gallant spirit. Bay. Boys will be boys, so let's put them to use, as an ancient placation, apologia of men's spirits as indomitable, uncontainable, thus unaccountable. The overall impression is that physical virtues encouraged psychological excellence, perseverance, courage, and perhaps a greater sense of autonomy. Source: Damon Young's Plato Said Knock You Out, 2015. While easily parodied, this kind of male privilege socially sexually translates to brain-dead, pushy, masculine personas in the here and now that vampirically demand sex from those they deem inferior to themselves, women, or those in the case of femboys, women, quote-unquote, the top being stronger than the bottom, practitioners of these rapacious deeds, lying to themselves in increasingly bizarre ways. If it's not gay if we close our eyes and pretend, a sort of a don't-ask, don't-tell approach. Furthermore, the havers of the muscles become false preachers with false bodies and powers, king-like Pygmalions to worship and follow as leaders. Regardless of their authenticity or merit, the tissue is dead, slathered on like clay to disguise who they are/were, and entirely because of what they represent: ghoulish, patriarchal dominance under capitalism. This tilting at windmills, another dualistic idea useful and detrimental to different actors, extends to any cartoon under the sun, i.e., any showcasing of Superman, Thragg, or Immortan Joe et al. As chaotically sundowning, which, if you haven't already guessed, I love doing alongside Amazons. Exhibit 40G1 for Metroidvania Part 1, Away with the Fairies, or Double Trouble in Axiom Verge, 2024. Artist top, left, Wild Dragon, resembling the skeletal Immortan Joe from Fury Road, which came out a year before Axiom Verge, but also oddly Jacques Derrida, Aethos, is Haps writing with ghosts, by evoking the heteronormative spirit and cartographic tools of conquest. Exhibit 1A, 1A, 1H, 2A1 of the old Enlightenment tyrant, Conman Wizard of Oz, Peter Wayland. As the vain owner of everything around him, Wayland becomes desperate to cheat death. It only discovers the leveler on his own Promethean quest. A king has his reign, and then he dies. His daughter, Mary Vickers, explains to him that is the natural order of things. Artist Persephone Vanderward Ibid, and pointing that out becomes its own kind of joy, while in Rome, her son such Osut is dead, and we happily undead, dead and loving it above, a nudity as strength, through dialectical material context. Any way you slice it, vampires are vice characters whose abject experience, one of alienation and fetishization to differing degrees and ratios, is hideously attractive to self-righteous dickheads like Marx, and imitators of the man himself and those who survived him, or Stalin, Superman, or anyone else. They're closeted in ways that lead them to ignominious death, the dupe of their own worst enemy, slave to tradition, easily misled by overtures to false strength, Caesar pulled from mommy's womb to perish from exposure. So cataloging and wedding my lived experiences to my early YouTube work, video essays, and postgraduate work after my book series should give my viewers some idea of what being in the closet is like, or Superman's phone booth, or whatever Thragg uses keeping them in the dark. And likewise inform them on how we overcome that, challenge state vampirism and highly liminal, subversive ways of public nudism while doing crowd work, comedy, and ridicule, explains Thought Slime, being fascist kryptonite, one where fascists will waste your time, echoes my own tactical frivolity well enough. Artist Bruce Tim cited Teaching Between Medusa and Our Bodies and a Bit of Coaching, 2024. Need a place to change. Oh, to heck with it. The play with power per medium, e.g. video games, are those who walk away from speedrunning 2025, whilst fully or partially inside the closet, which the state's nuclear model is. You can't just say, go read Marx, or Stalin, Mao, Marvel, etc., because all of those men were queerphobic, or homonormative, in X-Men's case, 1963, and Foucault has his own problems, or a preface, 2024, though I enjoyed Butler well enough. And now that my book series is complete, I may comfortably articulate my own lived experience on camping state vampirism as I developed it, from childhood to some extent, but mainly from 2024 onwards, in my attempts to branch out and experiment while launching Gothic communism on the bones of the mighty dead, RE Exhibit 1. The homewrecker with a dirty little secret, as vampires and other anti-Semitic queerphobic tropes deal in. I'm excited to share it with all of you. just screaming with delight really, comfortable in my own weirdness, willingness to engage with abject things below. So concludes this mini essay on state vampires and camping them to drain them of their vitality for once. On to the rememory portion. Specifically this here, which we will read in part 4. For now, though, this section of Interview with the Vampire, part 3, which covered my essay on Superman and similar vampires from outer space, is at an end. Real quick, we have a couple footnotes here before we wrap up the video. Footnote 12. So here's a brief tangent mini essay about the charming side of state vampires. A good critic critiques power where it is, killing their darlings in fatal nostalgia, what True Gordy and company comically described during the AJ versus Dubois superfight in Saudi Arabia, sellouts to American hegemony furthering genocide behind bread and circus themselves, as watching Superman get killed by demons of the past killing the king, with all the grave severity of a bold Latter-day Walter Cronkite above, timestamp 4/25/11.
To Leo, buy one, get...
Every shot that Daniel lands is having an effect right now.
This is like watching Superman get killed.
He needs a clean punch and it's over.
AJ, this is horrid.
It's got to be the upcut. Come.
Oh, AJ is so gone. He's so gone. Throw the towel in, man. What we? He's gonna be knocked out here.
It's fucking.
Oh no, not Superman. As funny, childish, and phoned in as that sounds, they're frankly par for the course as far as kayfabe announcers go. History repeats in tragedy and then in farce, as Marx put it, 1852, summoning the past only to be devoured by it, Macbeth-style, r.e. when in Rome, all roads leading back to a system of domination that never really left, as continuously castrating itself, one line eating another. Abjection is repulsive, a gnarly process both hideous and revolting that concerns bodily functions such as eating tied to historical material atrocities, eating one's children, but especially one's bloodline, to doom patrilineal descent within the contradictions of capital entering routine crisis. Artist Francisco Goya cited Tactical Unity. Footnote number 13. And pouting like James Gunn and David Harbour's rendition of the creature chasing the bride in Creature Commandos. The same Mars Needs cheerleader shtick playing out in Invincible Superman species, the Viltrumites, super strong, but paradoxically weak enough to need state-prescribed mates, then invading other habitable worlds after destroying their own Brightburn style. Another Gunn project, one framing boy Superman as homicidal, a cuckoo species compared diegetically to wasps. R.E. Brightburn, Gothic Analysis, Part 1. Shelley's creature wanted a mate because he was alone, but also one of a kind, and literally man-made. The Viltrumites are an entire species, able to crossbreed with other races, so the metaphor doesn't match, a Nordic white genocide refrain Shelley did not argue for. Footnote 14. Smaug, who the voice actor for Thragg sounds like, being a silver-tongued and queer-coded seducer as much as a strongman in dragon form, artist the brothers Hildebrandt cited Policing the Horror. Thragg, by comparison, is voiced wonderfully by Lee Pace, who incidentally played King Thranduil in Jackson's Hobbit films. To that, Pace and co-star Richard Armitage, both eloquent, soft-spoken theater kids, and homosexual men outed, maybe accidentally, by openly queer Ian McKellen, notably inject their hypermasculine characters, the usual monomyth fare, with Shakespearean gravitas lacking in the original novel, cartoon, and comic versions, while leading into the original vampiric anti-Semitic elements. To that, Thragg is the male loner, whose best friend was an older man betrayed by his friends, echoing Alexander the Great, a famous homosexual warrior king who slept with men and boys, but also Octavian and Caesar, in a master-apprentice refrain. The Sith, from the Star Wars universe, is queer-coded in a deeply ancient format, military expansion and conquest through theft, dynastic primacy and forbidden love between a leader and their homosocial generals, one seen in quaintly homophobic stories with latently BDSM themes of ritualized torture like Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and Bungie's Myth the Falling Lords, 1954 and 1997, or A Concerning Rings, and Hail Caesar or Balor the Leveler as Gay Zombie Caesar, 2024. Ibid. The Last Battle. Lead your reinforcements to Ulrich and the other survivors of the previous battle. Then follow Ulrich and wait for a chance to kill Balor, a white knight in this case. Where did you find that accursed thing, Ulrich? And what madness made you raise it here? As a lesson in humility, Balor. About that, here's another tangent, one concerning Invincible, in particular, that pushback from the show's fans inspired, which concerned our childhood's darlings, and salvaging them is all made of the same basic stuff, monsters, which, from Tolkien to me, have value. This means the space opera, with Invincible the monomyth from space, featuring Supermen who fly, instead of mostly grounded space wizards twirling magic swords in space. If Jedi and Sith equal good cop, bad cop, or white knight, wizard versus black, Invincible uses kayfabe strongmen and women to achieve the same effect. The warrior nerd. Nolan is basically a scout like Raditz from DBZ, 1992, but also a spy assassin, Trojan horse, a homewrecker saboteur, double agent, and child soldier groomed for war, who, during Red Scare invasion fears, with American exceptionalism coded as innocent planet, corporate Darvo and obscurantism foisting the ruling class's crimes onto an angry himbo, deliberately kills the guardians of the earth. Then, and for maximum melodramatic effect, he catches feelings by going native afterwards. Oops. If anyone deserves to be critiqued, it's this guy. Shitty parentage was a core theme in Frankenstein, a story about generational trauma under Cartesian hubris. Nolan's basically if Raditz, or Goku, intentionally killed all the Z-fighters before King Vegeta comes to collect, the former burning bridges with Gohan and Chi-Chi, only to seek forgiveness and side with Dr. Gero to dethrone the tyrant, who made Nolan a monster when he was a child, i.e. face-heel reversals during shoots and fixes, expressing intra-racial conflict between Saiyans, or in this case Viltrumites, same difference, blood feuds bleeding interracially outwards as Promethean metaphors for ordinary folks relating godly personages. Furthering objection dehumanizes the in-group versus the out, i.e. as Ubermensch, Untermensch, under white replacement and genocide fears, but also backstabber scapegoat conspiracies leery of pacifism, which it brands traitor, trafficking with the enemy, and otherwise calls enemy within or foreign plot to serve the ruling class, i.e. eco. The state in crisis becomes vampiric through its godly hero's own alienation, and wherein the conspicuously self-prescribing and self-preserving superior side historically uses an arbitrary inferior for sex and food. As weak-strung broodmares mounted by entitled fake gods and maximalist exogamous racial hierarchy, one fueled by every bigotry there is to bully the globe. The whole thing is completely barbaric and asinine, but central towards understanding how capital works when in Rome. The conquerors are victims too, ignominiously extendable under state vampirism saving them for last. Thragg disembowels Nolan. Artist Pacuti cited the Promethean quest in James Cameron's military optimism in Metroid. Again, I was raised not just on Amazons, which the show has too, but shonen-style anime and Western cartoons in the 90s after the Cold War, so much so that my initial book series title was a toss-up between two forks in the road, neoliberalism and Yesterday's Heroes, which focused more on 80s-style action heroes, or policing bodies, and the Promethean quest in James Cameron's military optimism in Metroid, above. The latter which turned into Sex Positivity versus Sex Coercion 2022, and later expanded into Gothic Communism 2023, before absorbing neoliberalism while still analyzing shonen anime below. Exhibit 39C2 from Escaping Jadis or Running Up That Hill 2024. Dragon Ball has an absurd premise that is easily camped. DBZ Kings 541 the funniest DBZ dub I have ever seen, 2016. Its canon still rolls the modern Prometheus into the Iliad, presenting the zombie tyrant king as trapped between father and son according to man-made unnatural husbandries, the divine right of kings, and the imperial relationship of master and slave, but also the cruelty of a bully patriarch god towards his bizarre man-made children. The archaic male baby as a killer child for state forces stemming from Beowulf into the present space through ontological regeneration, i.e. as undead, composite, but also able to change its shape like Cuchulain's Rystrat, aka warp spasm, or Milton's Lucifer gradually shedding his angelic form to turn into a variety of animals, a demon, in other words. Exhibit 51B3 from Measured in Praise of the Great Enchantress, 2025. The Sentai and Shonen style of anime taps into ancient warrior ideas of masculine strength, virility, being something to summon and wash oneself in, i.e., in the fire of the gods, being destructive but also purifying in a variety of ways, e.g., Japanese Shintoism, the fascist side of Buddhism tied to Japanese sun gods, and the self-belief personal responsibility argument made into young post-occupation Japanese men. Specifically made in The Return of the Shogunate, for a brief moment, the argument unfolds during the Ronin warriors' whitewashing of Japanese imperial crimes. Said crimes likewise haunted by a really big and annoying wraith, whose appearance anticipates the Japanese 90s housing crash and boom and bust historical material cycle, a vice character literally called Tulpa, a Tibetan word comparable to yokai or agregor, to burn away with holy fire. It's a witch hunt, one whose myopic shadow, capitalist realism, is summoned, Radcliffe style, then prevented by embodying the destructive forces of nature for the state, a hideous, raging inferno. In other words, the show was something to canonically prepare the next generation for capitalist boom and bust, i.e. with a seasonal call to arms. More on this in Volume 3. Young sexy boy warrior threatened by white ghostly jizz, like coming for his codpiece, only to juke him, surround and envelop him, and begin to armor him in fire that, far from destroying him, basically turns him into human Godzilla, a sun avatar that banishes the darkness with rainbows for a short time by, and I'm not kidding, jizzing light from his sword onto the ghost emperor until said tyrant fucks off. Above, Jupiter handles the boys, while still appearing girly if austere. And in doing so, she subverts current Japanese hero tropes, i.e. by having the obvious and awkward damsel in distress rescued by another woman, actors of female property owners in the Warring States period being trained in the art of war to defend their homes from their husbands' rival warlords, in ways that speak to a shared desire with Western variants of the Amazon subversive wish fulfillment post-Marston and his Wonder Woman BDSM stick. The power fantasy calculated risk of being rescued through the theater of demon BDSM as subverting traditional Western ideas, scapegoating the Amazon and two-sided echo praxis from Japan to the US and vice versa. Instead, such devices become genuine heroes through Jupiter and the other less masked Sailor Scouts that all the same remain alien insofar as they aren't binarized but remain desirable precisely because of those liminal, erotically gendered components tied to force, sex, and war. Power is performance, which is largely dress up and play acting war as a matter of decolonizing gender rules, thus heteronormativity, and other qualities of capital while inside capital. Artist Akira Toriyama, or Cruisin' for a Bruisin', From Herbos to Himbos Part 1, 2024. Furthermore, all of these I still intersect with. Basically, I embraced my trans girly side with some tomboy mask elements, e.g. Sailor Jupiter, above, and focused on TERFs and Amazonamachia, while still critiquing the male cis-masculine side of things too, the Ginyu Force directly above. It was like learning how to cook and discovering ways to add flavor, but also learning what flavor was, while still cooking with delicious garbage, salvaging my childhood, my imaginary friends from that period didn't vanish. They changed insofar as I saw them differently, a vital method towards observing power's manifestation vampirically in society and how I could isolate and critique it, with bodybuilders essentially being means-tested gluttons reflecting in the knights of medieval Europe, the lowest order of nobility defending the crown, and most superheroes being cops, etc. From Invincible to DBZ or Star Wars and similar stories in multimedia forms, we want to apply critical thinking towards anything despite gatekeepers. For me in the Doom franchise, for example, shooters and speedrunning were things I grew up with and into side by side. From post-colonialism in Doom and No Girls Allowed to spectating FPS speedruns, potential pitfalls exemplified by Doom Eternal, to those who walk away from speedrunning and Fuck It Free Palestine 2021-2025. We want to comment on more than mere good-evil theatrics and dialectically materially recognize the allegory and aesthetics at work. Such things aren't zero-sum, the ensuing enjoyment intended and emergent. To it, consumption of popular media concerns state machinery directing consumers at their enemies, a Faustian bargain with Promethean self-destructive effects, as I write in Fuck It. Furthermore, these world events make its current Rambo-style power fantasies ring incredibly hollow. Doom's graphical bells and whistles / muscle are merely coats of paint designed to repeatedly whitewash genocide and pacify American workers. To render them the dupe, as Joyce Clocken puts it. Source: Playing Games and Fiction and Theory, 2020. The short Gamergate was victorious, and now the sedatives are in full effect, the state corporate hallucinations working overtime, consume, sleep, betray per Mussolini's fascist model, the merger of state and corporation to defend capital through popular media on and off stage. Submodel extends to workers endorsing force of will arguments during might makes right posturing. Fascism is the product being sold. White supremacy dressed up as mere play, which players perform beyond the usual avatars grown for the cyborgs. They're straight up dorks, but still want to kill people like me and my friends. To it, you don't watch Star Wars and miss the part about the evil empire space Nazis, meaning Vader and company, symbolizing American foreign policy in Southeast Asia during the 1950s until 1975 and onwards. Same idea with Doom, Invincible, or anything else I can list. Strongmen are not gods any more than Krypton is a real planet, but they and similar athletes still embody capital of the state and their executives in small, e.g. Sparta, Athens, America, Soviet Russia, etc., and turned boxing as the sport of the underclass, Napoleon Bonaparte's You Don't Hate Zuffa Boxing Enough, 2026. And bodybuilding isn't even a sport at all, a cult of the strongman centered around eugenics and statuesque physiques literally killing the performers themselves. Mystic Ratman's How Bodybuilding Became a Death Cult, 2026. The image of natural-unnatural binary is hyperbolic, but paradoxically requires moderation to avoid decaying into fascism, and all that entails. Liars and cowards, blowhards and violent pimps, all high in their own supply, well, not often simply addicted to attention, though that is part of it, but performance-enhancing chemical drugs being readily available in factory grades for gray to black market consumers since the 1980s, e.g. Trenbolone, a Frankensteinian growth hormone for cattle and not designed for human consumption, explains Alex Tatum or Chris Raynor. Capital makes you dumb, but especially those universal beneficiaries drunk on stolen blood, siphoned from stolen land, white straight guys, with those like Andrew Tate patting themselves prematurely and constantly on the back, and his fans who think he's cool, when he's really not, below. Cited, Fuck It, Free Palestine. I digress. This shit is fascinating to me. More to the point, thinking critically goes beyond the simplistically emotional operatic shit, and I say that as a gay theater nerd. Sacrilege, I know. We have to think past merely emotional subversion, or that superficial, cheap, upside-down crucifix, anti-LaVey-style Satanism, etc., when taking a dialectical material focus, which includes, and which I focus on, the social, poetic side of things during Little Gothic BDSM, versus other nerds different from myself who consume the same media. I realize I'm probably intimidating, not just from being neurodivergent, but also because of my pedigree, profession, gender, and journalistic platform. Then again, I was trained to hash things out in person, in early internet spheres into the 2010s, pre-AI and COVID, when students still took in-class essays for tests and debated each other in pro-con ways. It's something of a dying breed, and in my case that of a queer polymath who jumps at the chance not to win, but educating ways that do get heated. God forbid we care about those things we actually like. Most of written human history in academia and politics involves this kind of discourse, which, while it probably feels alien to many in a post-COVID world, remains important. To learn passionately what society moralizes, fears, and lionizes on par with Halloween's Michael Myers, the boogeyman below. Source, Exhibit 42D2, Seeing Dead People. An Invincible Strongman Panoply, the two sides of the same coin, the slasher and the savior, with the girl traditionally stuck between them, i.e. a love triangle. The point here, and speaking as someone who studied this shit all her life, is that bread and circus still contains plenty to analyze, i.e. taking a nation's temperature and then changing it through a challenging of anti-intellectual sentiment. This means actively combating a fear of or hatred towards teachers, women, minorities, etc. that punches up against reactionary systems, falling the leader into an early grave, Gamergate style. Going against the grain takes courage and a willingness to experiment, meaning to change, radicalize, and not do what you're told, but also consciously kill your darlings, the entire worldview that bread and circus canonically offers under capitalist realism. When reversing objection, yesterday's heroes revived in retro-future forms of regressive comfort food we enjoy and critique, re from saying goodbye unto better times ahead and harder ones, 2025. Once someone corrupts, they become bad cops, and sacrifices during the euthanasia effects. Refrain, during modular and intersectional persecution mania, i.e. nature is other, and death must be brought to the barbarian traitor or suddenly outsider menace, Brutus or Hannibal. I am nothing like you, shouts Sonic at his own shadow, Peter Pan style, while Robotnik, the evil Doc Brown, tries to turn the moon into a Wunderwaffe as the Marty vs. Biff Wunderkinds do battle outside, while the parent shoots themselves in the head from success fatigue. Now, where have we heard that before? Take your pick. History is littered with such copies and aggregors pointing to their offstage Roman fools in similar Icarian Promethean numerical sequences, re. Sonic 1, 2, and 3 versus World War 1, 2, and 3. First in tragedy and then in farce, such things repeat because they're built to repeat, i.e. as the elite want them to, harvesting the blood spill by moving money through nature during the pimp's revenge. To have the whore's revenge, burst in the heroic death cult's bubble, we must anisotropically reverse the flow on all registers, i.e. at the usual grave sites where capital has died and revived before, rather than install self-defeating abject us versus them apotropaic barriers, doing so to alienate and fetishize nature as undead demonic by chasing the shade monstrous feminine horror monomythically to hell to sacrifice them, as Sonic does, chasing his evil half into outer space to banish Shadow and Robotnik, a play on Peacenik and Beatnik, to oblivion. We must go to where the dead are and interrogate their trauma and token mistakes, to prevent a fresh, even worse cycle of cyclical destruction resulting from the Promethean quest and Faustian bargain tied to capital acting on loop. Capital is recursively Promethean Faustian, and neoliberal power is recursively false power and delusion, e.g. Superman, Super Saiyans, Supersonic, i.e. all equaling personal responsibility and austerity politics, alienating and fetishizing nature, thus workers colonizing themselves after God is dead, a secular dogma. Sex positivity versus sex coercion happened and the capitalist scene is fading towards state shift, i.e. we must revive increasingly socialist, thus communist forms during Gothic poetics to liberate all workers, sex or not, using iconoclastic art, to tow acutely to our pets in symbolic stewardship, all of us in the same boat, onto dead moles in the graveyards of capital, i.e. where Medusa waits for us inside. We need to negotiate with ourselves because she'll walk away with everything humanity has to offer. Gardner Wines, the end is nigh, but not secured. Artist, Pereira, Cartoon Studio. So experiment. Don't be afraid if they call you mad. Prove them wrong, whoever they are, by living your best life and making the world a better place, i.e. by using Gothic stories and poetics in duality. I love me some superheroes, but love the whore's revenge even more. Not escapism, but transformation inside, outside ourselves. Slay Queens.